Chapter 1916. Isn't this place pretty good? Song Qing-shu smiled evilly. Feeling the man's breathing quicken, Shun Bijuan thought of what was about to happen, and her entire body softened. Since she was young, she had been a well-behaved young miss of a wealthy family. The entire Shanin city praised her as a virtuous lady. She had never thought that her first time would not be on her wedding night, nor did she think that the location of her first time would not be on the bed, but in this bathtub. What was the difference between this and the kind of wild intercourse that books spurned? Although reason told her that she couldn't do this, a deep restlessness came from the depths of her soul. Since she was young, she had been too well-behaved. She always followed the rules to satisfy the expectations of the people around her. Everything had become instinctive. Even she herself thought that she was such a person. But at this moment, all the things that she had been taught since she was young were thrown to the back of her mind. She suddenly wanted to try something outrageous, such as offering her chastity that she had treasured for more than 10 years to this man here. Thinking of this, her entire body softened. Relying on her own strength, she found it difficult to stand. Her entire body was almost completely hanging on the man in front of her. How could Song Qing-shu not see that the beauty in front of him was completely aroused? The two bodies were tightly pressed together. Feeling that incomparably smooth and moving skin, he thought of the young miss of the Shun family, who countless princes and grandsons of Jiangnan, now unguarded and wrapped around his body. She looked like he could do whatever he wanted. No man could resist this kind of temptation. Even the usually calm Song Qing-shu couldn't do it, much less now that he was 70% drunk. He fiercely and passionately kissed every part of her body, like a male lion leaving his mark on his territory, declaring his sovereignty. Shin Bijuan had originally been bathing. At this time, her body could be said to be naked. As the other side pressed and pressed step by step, she gradually lost her defense. Every line of defense collapsed at a touch, and soon she was surrounded by soldiers. Song Lang, Shin Bijuan's voice was originally very delicate, let alone in this situation. This call could even soften steel that had been tempered 100 times. Although Song Qing-shu was a little drunk, he still took pity on her because she was still a virgin. He didn't open and close like a mature woman like Madame Ruan. Instead, he slowly and firmly approached her. Noticing that the girl's eyebrows were slightly furrowed, he very gently used kisses and words of love to dissolve her nervousness and pain. Just as he was about to enter, screams and exclamations suddenly came from outside, followed by the deafening sound of a gong. What's going on outside? The two of them were shocked. Shun Bijuan bit her lips, her voice even softer than a mosquito's. Her flawless face was incomparably red, and her eyes were misty. Her eyelashes were trembling slightly, and her white skin was covered in droplets of water. It was unknown if it was sweat or the hot water in the bathtub. Don't worry about him. Let's continue. At this moment, the arrow was knocked on the bowstring. Who cared about the flood? Shin Bijuan gave an almost inaudible grunt before burying her head into her lover's chest. Song Qing-shu felt as if his blood was boiling and his body was as hard as iron. Only the gentleness of a woman could slowly dissolve this feeling. But at this moment, the faint exclamations of the servant girl and the manservant came from outside. Madam was assassinated. Madam is gone. Song Qing-shu froze all of a sudden, accompanied by all sorts of sobbing sounds. In the entire residence, who else could be called Madam other than Ruan Xingzhu? Was she assassinated? Thinking of Madame Ruan's charm and gentleness, thinking of the happy time they spent together, and then thinking of the child in her belly at this time, Song Qing-shu didn't feel very dizzy when he was drunk just now, but at this moment, he felt the world was spinning. Did something happen to Sister Ruan? Brother Song, quickly go and have a look. Shin Bijuan also heard the noise outside. After coming to the Yang mansion, Ruan Xingzhu had been very good to her. She naturally didn't want anything to happen to her. Dong dong dong. At this time, there was a hurried knock on the door, and at the same time, Shun Xiaolong's voice came, young master. Thinking that Big Brother was outside, The courage that Shun Bijuan had just mustered disappeared in an instant. She hurriedly urged her lover, "Brother Song, quickly go and have a look. And don't let Big Brother come in and see." Even if he was the only remaining relative of the Shun family, she didn't want him to see her in her lover's room so late at night. She didn't want him to see them like this. Song Qingshu nodded and quickly got up to put on his clothes. "Quickly put on your clothes and don't go out. Be careful and stay here." Then he ran out with a gloomy face. What happened? When he went out, he saw Shun Xiaolong standing at the door. Although he still looked a little drunk, he was more anxious at the moment. "I heard that an assassin tried to assassinate Madame Ruan. I'm afraid Madame is already." After all, Shun Xiaolong was now independent and had many personal guards with him. Someone had already reported to him what happened. How is it possible? The Ruan family is heavily guarded. How could the assassin succeed so easily? Song Qingshu's face was gloomy and scary. The Ruan family was the #1 royal merchant in the world. Many people coveted their wealth. Moreover, after the incident on the ship last time, Ruan Xingzhu had specially strengthened the guards around her. In addition, the Yang family was also one of the richest families in Sichuan. At this time, even if the guards in the mansion were not as good as those in the palace, they were not much worse. Looking at the whole world, other than those masters who could successfully break in, no one else had the ability to do so. However, people who had reached the level of masters disdained to do such sneaky things. As the two of them rushed to Ruan Xingzhu's courtyard, a guard behind Shin Xiaolong answered, "I heard that the assassin's Qin Gong was very good. He was like a ghost. The guard in the mansion found him, but still let him escape." Song Qingshu's heart suddenly sank. Since the assassin could leave so easily, he had most likely succeeded. It seemed that Madame Ruan was in danger. Speaking of which, it was because the courtyard of the two of them was too far apart. Otherwise, the assassin would not have been able to hide from his eyes and ears. However, this was the Yang mansion after all. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, it was impossible for Ruan Xingzhu and Shun Xiaolong to stay in the backyard of the inner family's residence. She could only arrange for them to stay in the wing room. Song Qingshu was burning with anxiety. He directly used Qin Gong to rush to Ruan Xingzhu's room. The two of them often hung out, so he naturally knew where her boudoir was. The rest of the people only saw a blur before they lost sight of him. They could not help but secretly click their tongues. Shin Xiaolong's personal guard originally did not understand why his master was so polite to this young man. It was only until now that he was sincerely convinced. In a few breaths, he rushed to Ruan Xingzhu's room. He found that there were already many people gathered outside. Many people were crying. There were even doctors going in and out, bringing out some bloody bandages from time to time. His heart suddenly jumped. Chapter 1917. Song Qingshu turned his head and saw that it was Ruan Xingzhu's personal servant, Pearl. He quickly asked, "How is your mistress?" Pearl smiled. "Young master, do not worry. Just follow me." Seeing her smile, Song Qingshu's worry lessened. At the same time, he became more suspicious. He followed her to a small room in the courtyard next door. The door slowly opened. A voluptuous figure was sitting behind the curtain. Who else could it be but Lady Ruan? "Are you all right?" Song Qingshu was surprised. He rushed over and looked her up and down. He could not see any signs of injury. "Do you want something to happen to me?" Ruan Xingzhu said softly. Seeing him so nervous, she, who had long passed the age of a young girl, felt as sweet as a young girl in love. "Of course not," Song Qingshu hurriedly explained. "I just heard everyone say that you were attacked by an assassin. I also saw the doctors go in and out of your room, carrying many bloody cloths. That was just my substitute," Ruan Xingzhu replied. "Originally, I was just in case. I did not think that I would actually save my life. The assassin sneaked in without anyone noticing, but he accidentally hit me." "How is your substitute?" Song Qingshu never thought of himself as a gentleman, but he could not ignore the lives of ordinary people. He was heavily injured. "I do not know if he can make it." Ruan Xingzhu's tone was very calm. For a large family like hers, preparing a substitute was a very normal thing. In the beginning, she had already prepared to sacrifice a substitute. Naturally, There was nothing to be surprised about. I have some heaven fragrance intermittent ointment here. It is very effective in treating external injuries. Give it to the substitute. Song Qing-shu took out a porcelain bottle and gave it to Pearl. He traveled to Jianghu and carried all kinds of spiritual medicine with him in case of emergencies. Pearl quickly took the bottle and went to the courtyard next door. Ruan Xingzhu could not help but say, "You are very kind. I will save as many as I can." Song Qing-shu sighed. In this chaotic world, human lives were like grass. He could only do his best to help those he could. In fact, this was also the reason why he wanted to fight for the world. As someone who had come from a peaceful era, he could not bear to see ordinary people destitute in the endless chaos of war. By the way, where did the assassin come from? Do you know? Asked Song Qing-shu. The people who want to kill me are either from Yang Jiyuan's faction or the Jiao family. If they can hire an assassin like that, then the rest of Yang Jiyuan's motley crew obviously cannot do it. That leaves only Jia Sherdao. Because of Han Xingzhou, Ruan Xingzhu did not like Jia Sherdao at all. Song Qing-shu furrowed his brows and asked, "Where did that assassin come from? How was he able to sneak into the heavily guarded Yang manor without a sound, and even escape after successfully assassinating them?" That was what he could not figure out. Ruan Xingzhu had already strengthened the defenses. Although the guards of the Yang house were not as strong as the guards of the palace, the Yang house was much smaller than the palace, so it was easier to defend. So, for the assassin, it was not as easy as an assassination in the palace. But the assassin had sneaked in under such tight defenses. That person's Qinggong is too good. I am afraid he is one of the best in the world. That is why the guards of the house could not stop him, answered Ruan Xingzhu. Song Qing-shu nodded inwardly. He had experienced this the most. Many times he had ventured into the tiger's den. He had relied on his peerless Qinggong to break through impossible situations. But that is why his identity was exposed. Ruan Xingzhu sneered. "Oh, who is he?" Song Qing-shu was also very curious. Looking at the experts of Qinggong in the present age, those who were worthy of the title of unfathomable aside from himself were Dongfang Mushu, Wei Yixiao, and so on. However, no matter how he thought about it, these people could not be assassins. His Qinggong is great, but he is not famous. "I am afraid it is the wandering soul from the Mansion of Spirits," answered Ruan Xingzhu. The Mansion of Spirits. Song Qing-shu had a strange look on his face. Why did it sound so familiar? The Mansion of Spirits is a mysterious organization that has risen in the past 2 years. It has been hiding underground for a long time. It is normal that you have not heard of it, explained Ruan Xingzhu. There are many retired masters in the mansion. Many people are wanted in the Mansion of Spirits, so they hide in the Mansion of Spirits. I only found out about their existence because my caravans are well informed. 2 days ago, I received news that people from a Mansion of Spirits had entered the Chuan River, so I was able to confirm that the assassin was the wandering soul. Don't tell me the leader of the Mansion of Spirits is called Big Boss? Song Qing-shu asked suspiciously. Ruan Xingzhu shook her head. No one knows who the leader of the Mansion of Spirits is. Even the Ruan family, the #1 royal merchant in the world, only knows of their existence by chance. There are only 2 people in the Mansion of Spirits who have contact with the outside world. One is called the Wandering Soul. His Qinggong is like a ghost, like a wandering ghost. The other is called the Soul Collector. It is said that his swordsmanship is unfathomable, like a soul collector from hell. These 2 people are in charge of welcoming people from the outside into the Mansion of Spirits and are in charge of some of the external business of the Mansion of Spirits. Song Qing-shu did not remember who exactly was in the Mansion of Spirits. He did not know if this Mansion of Spirits was the one in the legend of Lu Xiaofeng that he remembered. In fact, there had already been some characters like Huang, Yi, and Gulong in this world, so it was not surprising that there was another Mansion of Spirits. In his opinion, it was very likely that some of the big bosses had dreamt of this mysterious world. However, each of them had only seen one side of this world. Naturally, many people and organizations that had existed in Jianghu had been left behind in their novels. After all, the world was so big and novels could not record every single one of them. This was also the only reasonable explanation Song Qing-shu could find for this chaotic world after thinking about it for a long time. I have never had any grudges against the Mansion of Spirits. This time, the wandering soul is here. Someone must have offered a very high price. Ruan Xingzhu sneered. Song Qing-shu was confused. How do you know it was Jia Sherdao? You know he has many masters under his command. Why would he need to go through the Mansion of Spirits? Is he also in control of the Mansion of Spirits? As far as he knew, Jia Sherdao could control the masters of the Guild of Chivalry. There were countless men of sacrifice in the Prime Minister's mansion, as well as the masters of the Song Mountain sect and other evil sections. Not necessarily, Ruan Xingzhu replied. I used to work for Prime Minister Han, so I know the rules of the game for these people. Destroying the body is actually the worst way to go. Unless there is no other choice, they usually won't do it because it will cause endless trouble and give their political enemies a chance to talk. But if they really have to do it, they have to do it cleanly. They can't let themselves be involved in it. So, they will never use their power in the open or in the dark. That way, if they find out, they will be able to get away with it. So, this time, he must be the one who invited the Mansion of Spirits. Song Qing-shu could not help but say, Then, won't you be in danger in the future? Don't worry. After all, the Ruan family and the Yang family have been standing for so many years. Now that we are on guard, how can they succeed so easily? Ruan Xingzhu replied. And this time, I can pretend to be seriously injured to fool Jia Sherdao and the Mansion of Spirits. They will think that I will die, and naturally, they will not come again. That's good. But guarding against thieves for 1,000 days is not a long-term solution. It is best to solve the problem from the root, Song Qing-shu said in a deep voice. Ruan Xingzhu smiled bitterly and said, The root is Jia Sherdao. It is not that easy to get rid of him. Besides, the Mansion of Spirits is very mysterious. No one knows who is there, where they are, and how to solve the problem. Song Qing-shu was suddenly shocked because he thought of something. In the original book, the leader of the Mansion of Spirits was the Wooden Taoist, an elder of the Wudong sect. Because he married and had children in his early years, he could not inherit the position of the sect leader. So, he held a grudge and gathered a large number of outlaws in the Jianghu, trying to kill all of his enemies at the inauguration ceremony of the Wudong sect leader and become the sect leader. This world has the Wudong sect, but I wonder if there's a Wooden Taoist? Song Qing-shu hurriedly asked, Madam, do you know if anything happened in the Wudong sect recently? Ruan Xingzhu looked strange. There's one thing. In about half a month, the Wudong Mountain will hold the inauguration ceremony of the new sect leader. Jinren Zhang will officially pass the position of the sect leader to the second disciple, Yu Lianzhou. Chapter 1918. Oh, Song Qing-shu raised his eyebrows. He was not surprised that Zhang Sanfeng would pass the position to Yu Lianzhou. Song Yuanxiao was supposed to take over the position, but because his son accidentally killed his seventh uncle, Muo Xinggu, he had to step down. Although Song Qing-shu was doing well now, he could not wash away the incident of accidentally killing Muo Xinggu, and Zhang Sanfeng would not pass the position to Song Yuanxiao. Previously, passing on the position to Yu Lianzhou was already something that everyone expected. It was just that there was no official succession ceremony. He was only the acting sect leader, but now it was obvious that he was going to become the official sect leader. Seeing that he did not speak, Ruan Xingzhu said carefully, You are usually very secretive, and even if the Wu-Tang sect wanted to contact you, they could not. I received the news not long ago, but I thought that the successor was not your father, so I did not tell you. Song Qing-shu laughed involuntarily. Do you think I'll be angry because my father didn't get the position of sect leader? Actually, second uncle Yu is the most suitable candidate. I accidentally made a mistake in the past, and my father taking over the position would not be convincing. Seeing that he did not seem to mind, Ruan Xingzhu breathed a sigh of relief. Young master, What you care about now is the power struggle in the court, and there is no need to care about these small fights in Jianghu. Great hero Song has a proud son like you. It is better to be the grand prince than the Wu-Tang sect leader. Song Qing Shu rolled his eyes. What great hero Song! You should call him father-in-law. Perwan Xingzhu blushed and spat. How can I call him that? Song Qing Shu smiled, but there was a haze in his heart, because he remembered that the mastermind behind the Mansion of Spirits was the wooden Taoist of the Wu-Tang sect, and then he planned to use the inauguration ceremony to usurp the position. He did not know if there was a wooden Taoist in this world, but there was a Mansion of Spirits, and the inauguration ceremony would also be held soon. It could not be such a coincidence. Before I go to Jiangnan this time, I want to go to the Wu-Tang Mountain to take a look. Song Qing Shu felt that he had to take a look before he could rest assured. After all, this trip to Jiangnan was along the Yangtze River, and Wu-Tang Mountain was on the way. When do you plan to leave? Ruan Xingzhu asked. Tomorrow morning. Song Qing Shu replied. The longer the delay, the more trouble there would be. It was better to go and take a look as soon as possible. This trip to Wudong Mountain might even be able to help you deal with the threat of the Mansion of Spirits, but before that, you still have to be careful. Now that they think I'm dead or seriously injured, they won't send anyone to deal with me again. Furthermore, with this warning, the guards in the mansion will be more focused on me in the future. It's impossible for them to use the same trick again. Ruan Xingzhu sneered. As the leader of the #1 royal family in the world, she had seen all kinds of storms and waves. Although the Mansion of Spirits was terrifying, the Ruan clan also had many experts under their command. Moreover, the resources that they could use were much more than this organization that did not dare to see the light of day. It's just that you have to leave so soon. We have just met, and we have to separate. Madame Ruan's voice was full of reluctance. Song Qing Shu said gloomily, Even if I stay, you won't accompany me. Madame Ruan smiled slyly. Didn't I compensate you with a great beauty that can cause the downfall of a nation? How about it? Did you take the opportunity to eat her tonight? Song Qing Shu said unhappily. What do you think? In the middle of the night, there was suddenly an assassin. I thought something had happened to you. Who would have the mood to do that? Madame Ruan looked at the sky outside and said with a smile, There is still some time before dawn. We can still continue our unfinished business. Song Qing Shu rolled his eyes at her. I'm not a teddy. Although Madame Ruan could not hear what a teddy was, she could roughly understand. She still advised, Sister Shun is alone here and not familiar with the people in the place. She must be very frightened now. You should go back and comfort her. Song Qing Shu nodded. Yes, I'm afraid she still doesn't know what happened. She is most likely thinking nonsense. You should go back quickly. Madame Ruan was a mature woman. She knew that it was meaningless to force him to stay in this situation. It was better to be magnanimous. In this way, whether it was Song Qing Shu or Shun Bijuan, they would remember her kindness. Then you have a good rest. Song Qing Shu came out of the room. Not long after, he met Shun Xiaolong. He roughly explained the situation to him, and Shun Xiaolong was relieved. After I go back, I will transfer an army to strengthen the patrol outside the Yang Mansion, so that those thieves can no longer find a chance. Shun Xiaolong and Madame Ruan were now in the same boat. He did not want anything to happen to his ally. Song Qing Shu agreed. Although the guards of the Ruan family were not weak, it was better to have an extra layer of insurance. Shun Xiaolong hurriedly left to arrange the defense of Chengdu City. Song Qing Shu returned to his room. At this time, Shun Bijuan had already dressed up. She looked worried. Seeing him come in, Shun Bijuan was suddenly surprised. Brother Song, how is Sister Ruan? Did something happen? Song Qing Shu replied, Don't worry, it was a false alarm. Then he roughly explained what had just happened. Shun Bijuan was relieved. Just now my heart was beating fast. I was worried that something had happened to Sister Ruan. Now, the result is really great. After saying that, she suddenly blushed, stood up, and said, Now that Brother Song is awake, I will go back to my room to rest. Song Qing Shu grabbed her. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Shun Bijuan lowered her head and didn't say anything. After that storm, She had calmed down. All of her courage had been sucked dry, and the education she had received since she was a child replayed in her mind. How could she dare to stay here any longer? Pisong Qingshu roughly guessed her thoughts and gently comforted her. There's just been an assassin in the mansion. I don't know if there will be accomplices or something. I'm worried about you. Madame Ruan could mobilize a large number of masters to protect her, but Shin Bijuan had no one to protect her. If something really happened, it would be the biggest regret. Hearing him say this, Shin Bijuan was a bit afraid. The previous experience made her not want to fall into the hands of thieves again. However, staying here in the same room with a man always made her hesitate. Pisong Qingshu continued, "Don't worry, I won't touch you again. Rest early. We will leave for Jiangnan early tomorrow morning." So fast? Although Shun Bijuan had long wanted to go back to the Shun Garden to see, this was a bit too rushed. When they were chatting at the table before, this was clearly not the plan. Pisong Qingshu replied, "There was a little accident. I have to go to Mount Wudong first to see. At that time, I can let my father see this beautiful daughter-in-law." Shin Bijuan felt her skin suddenly heat up. Clearly, she did not expect to see the parents so soon. However, in addition to shyness, there was also a bit of joy. Which woman did not want the marriage of the other party's parents to be recognized and blessed? Rest early, recover your energy, and be ready for the journey. Song Qingshu quickly took off his coat and went to bed. He casually patted the quilt beside him, indicating that she should also go up. The whole process was done in one go, as if it was something natural. Shin Bijuan secretly stamped her feet. If she had told her before that she would share a bed with a man who was not married, she would have thought that she was crazy. But now, she found that the strength of the other party made her not hate him at all. Instead, it gave her a feeling that she had never felt before. After hesitating for a moment, she slowly walked to the bed and lay down. Chapter 1919. At this moment, in the royal palace of Lin and City, thousands of miles away, Emperor Zhao Go was looking at the secret memorial on the table with a gloomy face. Suddenly, he flew into a thunderous rage. His evil intentions should be punished. His evil intentions should be punished. In such a short period of time, the Wu family's power in the 3 offices has been completely uprooted. Now the truth is out. Wu Shi was framed. Then, Jia Shidao symbolically comforted the Wu family. In the end, he got all the benefits and made me the scapegoat. Your Majesty, please calm down. There was a blurry figure in the shadows behind him. There was a hint of sarcasm in his voice. Weren't you the one who ordered the purge of the Wu family? Zhao Go was at a loss for words. He knew his personality. Most of the time, he would be very tolerant, but sometimes he would not be able to control his emotions and do something that would shock the world. Only a half-human, half-immortal like Huang Chong would be able to mock the temperamental ruler of a country in front of him without him daring to get angry. I was deceived by a scoundrel. The Murong family has always followed the Jia family's lead, and Murong Fu was also recommended by Jia Shidao. The entire chaos in Sichuan was caused by him behind the scenes. Zhao Go said hatefully, "The most intolerable thing is that he actually killed Han? Major? Tearing apart? School, speaking of which, it's my fault for being careless and being lured away by them. I didn't think they would dare to make a move in the palace." Huang Chong knew that the emperor in front of him was extremely angry because Jia Shidao had sent people to kill Han Wushuang in Yujin Garden. "Are you afraid of the bucktooth? Which mansion see waving heart mother plum, solid amaranth, sandalwood pod, quiet about raccoon xia, main open ba close. School? Plaque? Neon pole? Beginning with vinegar, coarse and rough? Assel? Lucky phoenix collapse? Trade? Sanskrit brush, siwu? The scorching hot water frequently splashes the stench of blood on the 4 sides of the flat. If a powerful official had no political enemies in the imperial court, then he would very quickly set his sights on the person sitting on the golden throne. Zhao Go said coldly, "Han? Lucky phoenix collapse? Ji Yu Chu? The waves and the wolves are clumsy? Go against the pride? Jing? A painting of a phoenix in a ditch? Pu Zhao ridiculing Zhong Hui Fu Dai Mo Gugu. All inferior? Hairdresser? Male-female pregnancy? 4. Nightmare horn? Lonnie lever? Take the pie. Hui? Damn throw? What about kerosene? Xin Hua Lu Huan cooking? Puming stock? Mistress? Make up the numbers? What? Hazy? Zheng Huangji? Qian Xiu Huang Xiu 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 Jiu asterisk? Chu Kai Chiao? Brother? Playing a trick? Chapter 4. Compare the elements? Anxious phoenix? Die for the swollen cow. Do you want to lower your capital to pry? Milk Yuju? Lower position. To flatter and flatter one is actually handsome, Huang Chong lightly said. If the emperor does not like it, then I will go kill him. He said these words very calmly, as if he was talking about something as easy as turning over his hand. Zhao Gou's expression changed. In the end, he still shook his head and said, no. Why not? Since he can kill Han? Major? Coquettish? Wei Huang Bo Bai. The handsome man was summoned by Yu Ling Xing Zhao Gou answered. Now that the northern expedition has just failed, the imperial court cannot afford to be shaken. Plus, he has many henchmen. If he is not careful, the consequences will be unimaginable. He wants to be heir Zhurong, but I do not want to be Emperor Xiaozhuang. In history, Emperor Xiaozhuang had killed heir Zhurong in a moment of impulsiveness. As a result, heir Zhurong's subordinates rebelled. In the end, Emperor Xiaozhuang was strangled to death in the temple. And Jia Sherdao is good at buying people's hearts. Now, everyone in and out of the imperial court calls him someone like the Duke of Zhou. Zhao Gou said self-deprecatingly, if I kill the Duke of Zhou, won't I be infamous for 10,000 years? Huang Chong was silent. He thought, you killed Yu Fei, and your name will be infamous for 10,000 years. Wang Meng is humble, but does not usurp the times. Unless the world knows his true colors, then it will be reasonable to kill him. A strange light flashed in Zhao Gou's eyes. What plan does the emperor have? Huang Chong looked at him with surprise. I plan to go to Wutang Mountain soon and summon Jia Fei, Jia Sherdao, and other officials, Zhao Gou said. Wutang Mountain? Thinking of the immortal-like figure on the mountain, Huang Chang's eyes flashed with excitement. The two of them had been friends for a long time, but unfortunately, they were busy with their own things. They had never seen each other after they had mastered martial arts. But although he was interested, he still tried to comfort him. In times of peace, the emperor is always in danger when he travels, let alone now that the world is in chaos. First of all, Mount Wudong is not far from the Jin Kingdom's territory. It will be troublesome if the Jin soldiers come to attack. Second of all, outside of the imperial city, the emperor's bodyguards will be greatly weakened. At that time, the ambitious people will be tempted. Now that the Mongols have returned to the east, the Jin Kingdom will definitely be on guard. They won't start a war at this time. As for the ambitious people, Zhao Gou snorted and smiled confidently. I'm not afraid of them moving. I'm only afraid that they won't move. Huang Chong immediately understood. The emperor wants to lure Jia Sherdao into making a move. Zhao Gou nodded. Jia Sherdao tried so hard to control everyone in the imperial court. Didn't he just want to sit on the throne? Unfortunately, there are too many things involved in Lin and City. Under the watchful eyes of the public, even if he had wings, he couldn't find a chance to be Wang Meng. So, I gave him this chance. Huang Chong said in a low voice, but this is still too risky. Wutang Mountain was located in the Jinghu Theater of Operations. It was the territory of the Liu brothers, and the Liu brothers were the direct descendants of Jia Sherdao. Luring the snake out of its hole in this place was like playing with fire. Zhao Gou explained, although I have left the imperial palace, Jia Sherdao has also left his nest. Now that he has more power than I do, he will be weakened even more. There is no need for the emperor to take such a risk. The safest way is to continue using the emperor's tactics to break up the four families. Huang Chong still didn't think it was appropriate. For example, Shi Miyuan. I think he is ambitious. He may not be willing to be under Jia Sherdao. The emperor can support him to fight against Jia Sherdao. Zhao Gou sighed. If I had enough time, I wouldn't take such a risk. But I don't have much time left, and you don't have much time either. Huang Chang was silent. He was able to live until now because of his all-seeing martial arts. But there was a limit to martial arts. No matter how good a person was, how could he fight against time? Recently, he had been having a sudden impulse. He had faintly sensed that his time was coming. As for Zhao Guo, he wasn't young anymore. The key was that the Jin kingdom had searched the mountains and seas to kill him. He was frightened and soaked in the sea, which damaged his meridians. Later, in order to regain his strength, he tried too many strange methods, which made his body worse and worse. Zhao Guo suddenly smiled. So I went to Wudong Mountain to ask Zhang Sanfeng about the art of immortality. I don't think anyone would suspect my motives. Huang Chang nodded. This was a perfect reason. Zhang Sanfeng was over 100 years old, but his entire face was glowing. He didn't look old at all. Looking at his arm, which was as dry as a skeleton, Huang Chang couldn't help but fall silent. Zhao Guo said, Jia Shidao cherishes his reputation. Even if he wants to usurp the throne, he won't do it in a big way. When the time comes, he will most likely choose a top master to do the job, and then find someone else to take the blame. If the war starts, I will have to trouble you, sir. Huang Chang snorted. If Jia Shidao really can't help but attack, do you really have a confidence? According to my observations over the years, Jia Shidao has many masters under his command. Not only does he have secret connections with the martial arts world of the Central Plains, but he also seems to have connections with the mysterious Isle of Chivalry in the South Sea. Once he attacks, it will be a thunderous attack. Just me and the Imperial Guards with the Imperial weapons and the Palace Guards may not be able to do anything to him. Zhao Guo smiled mysteriously. Don't worry. You won't be the only one. I have absolute confidence. Chapter 1920. Oh, Huang Chang was a little surprised. His opponent's tone seemed to be comparing that person to himself. It seemed like they were both great grandmasters. However, in the entire world, there were only a handful of people at his level. Half of them had already become one. Huang Tu asked, Who is that person? That person will enter the palace today. It's about time, Zhao Guo answered. Huang Chang looked outside and said in a low voice, He's already here. Umipa. Master Huang's skills are indeed profound. I purposely hid my aura, but I was still discovered by you. A burst of laughter came, and soon, a person dressed like a monk walked in from outside. It was said that he was dressed like a monk, but not a monk. The main reason was that this person looked a little strange. He was obviously bald, and there were traces of a ring scar on his head, but he was slovenly, which was a great contrast to the normal monk's attitude. More importantly, he had a huge wine gourd hanging on his waist. How could there be a monk who drank wine in this world? Huang Chang thought of someone from his aura and coldly said, You were the one who said that my 9-yin manual was too soft, so you created another 9-yang divine skill? The monk was startled, but he was calm. Master Huang, you have good eyes. You immediately saw through my background. Yes, I had a drinking contest with Wang Chongyang and beat him. I borrowed the 9-yin manual to read, and I did sigh. It turned out that he was the drunkard monk who won the 9-yin sutra from Wang Chongyang. After reading it, he was inspired and created the 9-yang sutra. If Song Qing-shu were here, he would definitely sigh in amazement. This was what a true grandmaster was like. The 5 aces of the Chinese plains were very famous in the world of martial artists, but aside from Wang Chongyang, the others had studied 9-yin manual for decades, and their martial arts often improved by leaps and bounds. But in the end, Wang Chongyang managed to master the entire 9-yin manual in just a few days. The drunken monk was even more ridiculous. He spent half a day flipping through it before he went back and created 9-yang divine skill, which was at the same level as him. Since you look down on my 9-yin manual, I'd like to see how capable you are. Just as Huang Chang finished speaking, he had already appeared in front of the monk. A pair of pitch-black hands that seemed to have come from the depths of hell gave off a demonic glow as they grabbed at the monk's major acupuncture points. Zhao Guo, who was sitting on the throne, felt the air in the room become extremely viscous. He could not help but frown. He knew that this was Huang Chang's domain. To a certain extent, He had changed the rules of the surrounding environment. He had not expected him to be so merciless. These two people were his greatest support. If both of them were injured later, wouldn't all of his plans go down the drain? He wanted to open his mouth to stop him, but Zhao Go kept his mouth shut in the end. After all, it was rare for people of this level to exchange blows. The plan that followed was abnormally dangerous. He wanted them to exchange blows, to understand the characteristics of each other's martial arts, so that they could work together better. Amitabha. The monk put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. His sloppy appearance instantly transformed into a solemn and dignified one. Waves of golden light radiated from his body, dispelling the dense black chi brought by his yellow robe. Ma, an iPad, me. Play. Fat dregs. Ji Huang equals Kuya long finger cluster bloated. Narrow great garden spear stick. Wooden ping pong drop kiss. Huang Cheng's expression changed slightly. Although his 9-in white bone claw had great destructive power, it had been created with some strange, evil chi. When it came into contact with the Buddhist treasure seal, it actually seemed to be suppressed. Oomph. The Buddhists have seals, but we Taoists don't? Huang Cheng's reaction was fast. The 9-in white bone claw instantly changed into a mysterious seal. The ghostly chi suddenly became somewhat otherworldly. Lin Bing Doja Jie Zhen Lai Qian Xing. The 9-secret seal was a popular seal used by the Taoists and the military school. It came from Gu Hong of the Eastern Jin dynasty. How could Huang Chang not know about it when he was cultivating the Taoist canon? He had already created a powerful technique based on it. As for the 9 secret seals of Japanese ninjutsu, Lin, Bing, Do, Jie, Zhen Lai Zai Qian, it was originally brought into Japan from the Central Plains. The dojo monk and Huang Chang. One was a Buddhist master, and the other was a Taoist grandmaster. The two of them exchanged dozens of moves in an instant using hand seals. This was different from those masters in Jianghu, who fought with flying sand and rolling stones. Every time they collided, the power was huge, but not a single porcelain cup in the room broke. This was the difference between a grandmaster and a normal grandmaster. They could perfectly control their strength and not waste a single bit of true chi on something other than their target. The two of you, please stop. Zhao Go felt that it was about time and stood up to stop them. If they really continued fighting, they might really get hurt. The 9-yang manual lives up to its name. In the blink of an eye, Huang Chang had already returned behind Zhao Go. His arms were faintly burning. It was obvious that his opponent's 9-yang genuine chi had invaded his meridians. He frowned slightly and circulated the 9-yin genuine chi in his body, expelling the heat from his arms. Back then, you were too arrogant. It looks like you did not understand the essence of the 9-yin manual. The drunkard monk returned to his sloppy appearance. He took down a large wine pot and drank a mouthful of wine. He also circulated his inner power to activate the slightly frozen meridians in his arms. Zhao Go was overjoyed and said, "Haha, with the two of you helping me, I will not have to worry about not being able to accomplish great things in the future." The drunkard monk smiled slightly. In the past, the Zhao and Song royal families were kind to my ancestors. I am here to repay this karma. After this, I will travel the world. The meaning behind his words was clear. He would only help Zhao Go this once. After this, they would not owe each other anything. He did not want Zhao Go to think of using him as a fighter in the future. Zhao Go smiled and said, "Of course. After this is done, why would I force you to stay?" Just as he was about to find someone to prepare vegetarian food and wine for the two of them, the drunkard monk said to Huang Chang, "After the battle, just now, I suddenly had many thoughts. Brother Huang, would you be willing to talk through the night?" Huang Chang gave a rare smile and said, "I couldn't ask for more." Then, the two of them directly ignored Zhao Go and walked out at the same time. From time to time, fragments of voices could be heard. Solitary yin does not give birth. Solitary yang does not grow. I feel that the balance of yin and yang is the correct way. Otherwise, I see that the universe is vast. The entire universe is definitely one where yin flourishes and yang declines. It is not in balance. Watching the two of them leave, Zhao Go was not angry at all. He only looked in the direction of the Jia residence in the south of the city. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Back in the city of Chengdu, Shun Bijuan went to bed bashfully. Song Qing-shu very naturally turned over and held her alluring body in his arms, causing her heart to tremble. Fortunately, the other party did not take any further action. Shun Bijuan breathed a sigh of relief. Her heart was thumping wildly. Her imagination ran wild for half the night before she finally fell asleep in a daze. Chapter 1921. Because he heard from Wan Foran that the inauguration ceremony of the Wudong Mountain sect leader was only a few days away, Song Qing-shu was worried that something would happen on the way. The next morning, he said goodbye to Wan Foran and Shun Xiaolong. As for Shun Bijuan, because she had to return to Jiangnan to pay respects to her parents, she naturally went with him. Madame Ruan knew that he had important matters to attend to, so she did not urge him to stay. She only stroked her bulging belly, revealing a bit of reluctance. When there was no one around, Song Qing-shu very hatefully kissed her belly a few times. Wait for father to come back. The result was that Wan Foran blushed and spat. In the future, when the child is born, he will inherit the Yang family's legacy. If you mention these things in front of him every time, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the child to accept. Can't I let him call me father? Song Qing-shu was suddenly a little dissatisfied. Of course not. Children don't have schemes. If the secret between us is revealed, then everything is over. Wan Foran's eyes moved. But you can let him recognize you as his godfather, so that no one will doubt him when he calls you father in the future. That's good. Song Qing-shu knew that what she said was the truth. Not to mention that his current strength was not enough to control the world. Even if he really controlled the world, in the face of all kinds of etiquette, he was afraid that he would be powerless. The identity of godfather could be considered the best of both worlds. On the other side, Shun Xiaolong also kept asking Shun Bijuan, "Sister, big brother can't leave this time. You must burn a few incense sticks in front of the Shun family for me." Bijuan understands. Shun Bijuan's eyes were also red at this time. This world paid the most attention to the concept of clan. Even when she was very young, Shun Xiaolong was kicked out of the family, but he still had the blood of the Shun family flowing in his body. He was her only relative in this world. It was not easy to reunite with them. So soon they had to separate again. Shun Xiaolong hesitated for a moment, then lowered his voice and said, "Brother-in-law has many female friends. You have to be mentally prepared." Shun Bijuan blushed. "I know." In fact, she had always been entangled in this point. With her pride, she was not willing to get involved in this muddy water, but her reason could not control her feelings, and in the end, she still fell. Shun Xiaolong was worried that she would turn a deaf ear to his words, so he continued, "Don't be jealous. Although your beauty is outstanding, which one of those sisters isn't a world-famous beauty? Moreover, each of them has great ability. If you become arrogant because of their favor, it'll be very difficult for you to establish yourself in the future." Seeing that she was silent with tears in her eyes, Shun Xiaolong sighed. "Sister, don't blame me for talking too much. You and I are the only ones left in the Shun family. I'm really afraid that you're not happy." Shun Bijuan wiped her tears and hastily said, "Big brother is worrying too much. The reason I'm crying is because your words made me think of my father. Back then, he often used this tone to scold me. Shun Bijuan, Shun, master, Shun Bijuan, Shun, father, Shun people, Shun, Tian, Shun, father, Shun. On the boat going down the river, Song Qing-shu smiled and asked Shun Bijuan, "What did your big brother say to you before you left?" Thinking of her big brother's words, Shun Bijuan's face turned red. She snorted, "You said you wanted me to listen to you." Song Qing-shu couldn't help but be overjoyed. Brother-in-law is absolutely right. Next time when I return to Chengdu, I must find him and drink another 300 cups. I don't know when he'll be back. Looking in the direction of Chengdu, Shen Bijuan faintly sighed. Transportation in this era was extremely inconvenient. A 2-hour flight in her previous world often took several months in this world. Moreover, there were all sorts of dangers along the way, and it was hard to say when one would die in a foreign land, so everyone was very sad about parting. Don't worry, there will be more and more opportunities in the future, Song Qingshu comforted. Shen Bijuan suddenly said, Brother Song, can you teach me martial arts? Don't you feel that playing with sabers and spears isn't good? Song Qingshu was a bit surprised that this kind of daughter from a noble family wanted to learn martial arts. Shen Bijuan bit her lips. If nothing had happened, I would still be the young miss of the Shen Garden. Of course, I wouldn't want to learn martial arts. But now that so many things have happened, if I knew martial arts, many of the misfortunes wouldn't have happened in the first place. None of this is your fault. Seeing that she was about to cry, Song Qingshu quickly comforted her. Don't cry, don't cry. I'll teach you martial arts. Really? Shen Bijuan finally smiled through her tears. But she immediately said awkwardly, I heard that learning martial arts requires a foundation from a young age. Isn't it a bit too late for me to learn martial arts at my age? It really is a bit late. Song Qingshu nodded. The majority of people in this world started to build their foundation from a young age. By adulthood, their meridians and other things had already been set, so it was much harder to learn. Shen Bijuan's face was immediately filled with disappointment. Song Qingshu smiled. A normal master wouldn't be able to teach you anything, but I happen to know of a technique that is suitable for you. Really? Shen Bijuan finally remembered that her lover was a world-renowned master. She couldn't help but jump for joy. What technique is it? Song Qingshu revealed a strange smile. This technique is called Desire Samadhi, spiritual feat scripture. Desire Samadhi? Shen Bijuan frowned. Why is this technique so hard to pronounce? Song Qingshu said, the name is a bit hard to remember. You can call it spiritual feat scripture. He knew many martial arts, but the one that had no barriers to entry, did not harm the heavens, and improve at the same time was the spiritual feat scripture. After all, with Yutanji's talent, he was able to cultivate top-notch internal energy. Of course, he wouldn't tell her that the postures of his female friends practicing the spiritual feat scripture were also very important. Next, he began to explain the various advantages of this technique to Shen Bijuan. Shen Bijuan's heart palpitated as she listened, but after she started practicing, she couldn't help but blush. Can this martial art really become a peerless technique? Of course it can. Song Qingshu couldn't help but admire Shen Bijuan. She had clearly never practiced martial arts, nor did she practice ballet like the women of the future, but her flexibility was still top-notch. It had to be known that many of the movements in the spiritual feat scripture went against the body structure. Most people couldn't do it. But why do I feel like this technique is used to please men? Shen Bijuan's face was full of doubt. Song Qingshu smiled. Don't worry, this is an orthodox Buddhist technique. There are no side effects, and the effects are quick. Of course, the effects you mentioned were just unexpected by the creator. After all, no one in India would have thought that there would be female disciples in Buddhism. Seeing him admit it so calmly, Shen Bijuan felt embarrassed. Brother Song, can you leave for a moment? I'm so embarrassed right now. Song Qingshu laughed. How can I do that? Cultivating internal energy is dangerous. I have to watch over you from the side in case something happens to you. Chapter 1922. Song Qingshu's face heated up, but he reacted quickly and hastily said, That's for people with a foundation in martial arts. But you've never practiced martial arts before and aren't familiar with many of the meridians and acupuncture points. Naturally, you need me to watch over you. Oh, Shen Bijuan nodded in a daze, feeling that what he said was somewhat reasonable. The two of them continued to practice like this. One was dripping with sweat, while the other was leisurely admiring from the side. Time unknowingly passed, and when night came, Shen Bijuan felt her entire body aching. Song Qingshu explained, I just started practicing today and stretched many of my meridians. It's normal to have some pain. It'll be fine in a couple of days. If you feel too much pain, I can give you a massage to circulate your blood. It'll heal faster. No need. Shinbijuan was so frightened that she hastily waved her hands. Wouldn't that mean he would have to touch her body? Even though he seemed to have touched everything on her body that shouldn't be touched, her young Mrs. Modesty still made it difficult for her to let go. Then taking a hot bath is the same. I'll have a servant girl prepare hot water. The ship they were on was the Ruan family's merchant ship. It was much better than a normal ship, allowing them to enjoy the most comfortable service. After practicing for a day, her body was covered in a thin layer of sweat. How could Shinbijuan resist the temptation of a hot bath? When she untied her dress and soaked herself in the bathtub, her heart was still pounding. She thought to herself, what if Brother Song comes in later? Should I refuse or half-heartedly accept? Thinking of some embarrassing scenes, her face had long since become incomparably red. But even after she finished bathing, he still hadn't come in. After putting on her clothes, Shinbijuan was a bit worried and went outside to look for him. When she reached the deck, she didn't find any trace of him. Her heart couldn't help but jump. Brother Song, where are you? In the end, there was a faint sob in her voice. It had to be known that during this period of time, only when she was by Song Qingshu's side would she feel a sense of security. Now that she had suddenly lost him, she was like a lost child. Panic, fear, and all kinds of other emotions surged in her heart. I'm up there. At this time, a gentle voice came from above. Shinbijuan looked up and saw a bright moon in the sky. Song Qingshu was leisurely sitting in the middle of it. She hurriedly rubbed her eyes, and only then did she realize that he was actually sitting on the main mast of the merchant ship, casually holding a wine pot in one hand and a wine cup in the other, drinking alone under the moon. Because of the angle and the lighting, she accidentally thought that he was sitting on the moon. Shinbijuan had seen many people drink, but she had never seen someone drink so much like an immortal. She thought to herself, no wonder so many of the women in Jiangnan's chambers called him the exiled immortal. What are you thinking about? Come on up. Song Qingshu's voice interrupted her thoughts. Shinbijuan's face turned red. She bit her lips and said with some embarrassment, I can't come up. I'll pull you up. Song Qingshu reached out and used the dragon capture art. Shinbijuan felt as if her entire body was being grabbed by an invisible hand and lifted up into the air. By the time she reacted, she was already sitting on the mast. Seeing how high up she was from the deck, she panicked and her body went soft. How could she sit still? Once again, he fell headfirst onto the ground. Shinbijuan let out a startled cry, but the pain she imagined didn't come. She couldn't help but open her eyes and find that she was standing next to her lover. Don't be afraid. I'm here, said Song Qingshu with a smile. Hearing his words, Shinbijuan felt as if all her fear and panic had disappeared. Being by his side made her feel at ease. Song Qingshu handed her a cup of wine. The night wind is cold. Drink a cup of wine to warm your body. Seeing her hesitation, he couldn't help but laugh. Do you think drinking with a man in the middle of the night is too unladylike? Shinbijuan laughed. Of course it's like that with other people, but drinking with Brother Song is an exception. She picked up the wine cup and drank in one gulp. She felt a spicy sensation flowing from her throat all the way to her stomach. Her neck couldn't help but slowly blush, and then the blush gradually spread across her fair cheeks. She suddenly realized that this was the cup he had just drunk from, and her face became even more beautiful. Song Qingshu looked at her with surprise. Bijuan's drinking style isn't inferior to any man's, but this wine is very strong. It's dangerous for a woman to drink with a man like this. Shinbijuan's eyes became watery. I won't drink with other men. The meaning behind her words was clear. Even if she got drunk in front of him, she wouldn't worry. Song Qingshu's heart warmed, and he could not help but smile. Such a beautiful day and beautiful scenery. With a beautiful woman to accompany me, I really need to drink a few more cups. As he said that, he poured himself another cup of wine and downed it in one gulp. Shin Bijuan tucked her skirt under her legs to prevent the wind from blowing and being seen by the people on the deck. She asked, Brother Song, why are you drinking here so late at night? Is there something bothering you? Song Qingshu nodded. Yes, I'm a little worried about Mount Wudong. I feel like something is going to happen. Shin Bijuan tried to persuade him. Brother Song, you're worrying too much. Even I, a non-Jianghu person, know that Zhang Zhenren is a martial arts legend. The 7 heroes of Wudong are all as good as a sect leader. Even if someone wants to harm them, it won't be that easy. Besides, it won't take us a few days to get to Mount Wudong. Song Qingshu thought about it and agreed. Bijuan, you're quite insightful. Right? We don't have enough information right now. There's no point in worrying too much. Let's wait until we get to Mount Wudong. The two continued to drink and chat for a while. Song Qingshu noticed that her body was trembling. It's too cold here. Let's go back to our room. Okay. Shin Bijuan shrank back. The wind on the river was strong, and they were still on the mast. If she hadn't been drinking wine to warm her body, and if she hadn't been in his arms, her body would have been frozen to death. But when she looked down, she felt dizzy and didn't know what to do. Song Qingshu understood her awkwardness. He smiled and said, I'll carry you down. Shin Bijuan pursed her lips and quietly nodded. Song Qingshu hugged her and couldn't help but smile. No wonder people say women are made of water. Bijuan, you really are soft, as if you don't have any bones. How annoying. I wonder which lecher would dare to say something like that. Shin Bijuan only heard the wind whistling in her ears. When she opened her eyes again, she was already in the room. He put her on the bed. Song Qingshu got up and said, Rest well. Chapter 1923. Song Qingshu was startled, but he quickly reacted. Then I won't leave. This time, it was Shin Bijuan's turn to be dumbfounded. She had thought that he would put up a front and pretend to decline so that she could consider whether or not she should keep him. She hadn't expected him to directly agree, making it so that she wouldn't be able to use her words. I'm just keeping you to sleep. Don't think too much, Shin Bijuan hastily explained. Song Qingshu smiled happily. I know it's sleeping. Shin Bijuan's face turned red. She felt like her words were ambiguous and immediately added, It's just sleeping. Is there anything more than just sleeping? Song Qingshu smiled even more happily. Shin Bijuan had clearly already taken a bath, but her face still looked like it was covered in a layer of rouge. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply turned her back to him. Looking at the beautiful curves in front of him, Song Qingshu praised her inwardly and then crawled under the covers. Shin Bijuan was so nervous she couldn't say anything. The entire room fell into an ambiguous and quiet atmosphere. All that could be heard was their slightly messy breathing. After an unknown amount of time, Shin Bijuan's trembling voice rang out. You said it was just sleeping. I just wanted to hug you. It's getting cold, so hugging you to sleep will keep me warm. Song Qingshu replied naturally. Shin Bijuan pursed her lips but didn't say anything else. After a while, Shin Bijuan finally couldn't help but ask, Then why did you start taking off my skirt? You don't even take off your clothes when you sleep? Scientific research shows that the less clothing you wear when you sleep, the more rest you get. Song Qingshu replied seriously. Shin Bijuan was speechless. After a while, Shin Bijuan whispered, Then what is it now? Song Qingshu answered with a straight face. Didn't you say that your tendons and meridians were hurting from training? I'm helping you loosen them. Shin Bijuan opened her mouth, but in the end, she silently agreed. After a while, Shin Bijuan's entire body trembled. Her voice was soft and charming. Then what about now? I'm just taking a stroll. I'm not going in. Song Qingshu said a classic line that was popular in his previous life. Shin Bijuan bit her lips. Her skin had already turned pink, and her eyes were misty. Brother Song, I feel like I've been tricked by you. Song Qingshu smiled and said, If you don't want to, I'll leave now. Shin Bijuan grabbed his hand that was wrapped around her chest and bit it. Do you really have to tease me like this? Song Qingshu sucked in a breath of cold air. Looking at the tiny bite marks on his arm, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. I didn't expect you to hurt me first. Shin Bijuan finally got back at him. Her lips curled up slightly. Who told you to keep bullying me? She couldn't help twisting her waist, but her body suddenly froze. She immediately realized something and was speechless. Song Qing-shu smiled proudly and gently hugged her alluring body from behind. Feeling the milky white and delicate skin on his back, he slowly pressed his body against hers. Last time we were disturbed by the assassins in Chengdu. How about we continue today? Song Qing-shu moved closer to her ear and asked. Shin Bijuan thought to herself, "You're already at the gates. What can I do?" She could only lower her head and shyly agree. Following a gentle and tender moan that could make any man's blood boil, the room was quickly turned red. In the next few days, the two of them didn't leave the room unless they occasionally went to the deck to get some fresh air. One was full of energy, and the other had just had her first taste. Soon, the world lost a proper and virtuous lady and gained a passionate young woman. On this day, as he gazed at the faintly discernible Jiangling city in the distance, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but say, when Li Bai wrote, "Morning hair to White Emperor's City," he definitely had a peerless beauty like you at his side. Half of Shin Bijuan's body was currently nestled in his embrace, tenderly gazing at her lover. She couldn't help but be startled by his words. Song Lang, the background of Li Bai writing this poem, should have been when he married Prince Yong, banished to Yelong, and traveled through Sichuan to his demotion. When he arrived at White Emperor City, he suddenly heard the pardon and wrote it in delight. Since he had been exiled by the imperial court to a savage land like Yelong, how could he have brought a woman with him? She had been skilled in the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting since childhood, and was a talented woman renowned far and near in Jiangnan. She was naturally familiar with these illusions, so when she heard her lover's reasoning, she felt rather confused. Song Qing-shu gave a strange smile. If he didn't have such a peerless beauty at his side, how could he have written such an apt phrase as 1,000 li in Jiangling is returned in a single day? Shin Bijuan was at first stunned, but she was no longer that young miss who had been raised in her boudoir and didn't understand anything. Especially after these last few days of Song Qing-shu's tutelage, she was becoming more and more familiar with those punning words. She quickly reacted and couldn't help but angrily say, "Song Lang." Hearing the dissatisfaction in her drawn-out and coquettish tone, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but roar with laughter. "Is that not the case? Chengdu is so far from Jiangling. I originally thought it would take a long time, but after spending every day with you in the room, it feels like time passes very quickly." "You're not allowed to say it." Shin Bijuan hastily covered his mouth. When she thought of the scenes they had spent in the room these last few days, she felt incredibly embarrassed. Fine. If you don't want to say it, then I won't." Song Qing-shu pulled her into his embrace. Feeling her soft and supple body, his heart warmed, and he directly carried her into the room. Shin Bijuan jumped in fright. What are you doing?" Song Qing-shu replied. "Once we get ashore, the journey will be inconvenient. Let's take this time to enjoy ourselves." Shin Bijuan's face immediately turned completely red. She hastily said, "It's still daytime right now." "So what if it's daytime? It's not like there hasn't been daytime these past few days." Song Qing-shu laughed, causing Shin Bijuan to quickly bury her head in his chest, as if this was the only way to dispel the embarrassment in her heart. After getting ashore in Jiangling, they headed north. After a few days, the two arrived at the Wudong County at the foot of Mount Wudong. Song Qing-shu said to Shin Bijuan, "We're almost at Mount Wudong. Let's eat something and rest before going up." "Okay." Shin Bijuan smiled slightly. She had been covered in dust these past few days. If it weren't for him taking care of her, she might not have been able to hold on. They found an inn. As soon as the two entered, they attracted the gazes of the customers inside. The man was tall and handsome, and the woman was devastatingly beautiful. When they stood together, they were truly a beautiful couple. Of course, most of their gazes were still on Shin Bijuan. Even though Wudong was a place where many young masters and misses often came to visit, this was the first time they had seen such a beautiful fairy. This kind of envious, jealous, and hateful gazes, why does it feel so good? Song Qing-shu was beaming with joy. Not only was he not reserved at all, he even wrapped his arm around the slender waist of the beauty beside him, as if declaring his sovereignty to everyone. This was his woman. Jealous? Waiter, give me a few exquisite dishes and a jug of good wine. Song Qing-shu sat down in a dignified manner. Chapter 1924. He saw a few Taoists sitting in the corner, and the one leading them was an old Taoist. He sat there with a dignified air, like a sect leader. However, Song Qing-shu thought about it for a long time, but he did not expect such a person to exist on Mount Wudong. Beside him sat a few young Taoists, and the most eye-catching were two of them. Although they had beards on their faces, they were thinner than ordinary men. Sissy. A word popped into Song Qing-shu's mind, but he did not think much about it. After all, these two Taoists looked ordinary. Even if they were women dressed as men, they must not be very good-looking. Song Qing-shu could not be bothered to deal with these idle people, but on second thought, Wudong sect was about to hold the sect leader succession ceremony, and there was also a Taoist who looked extraordinary appearing here, so it was better to find out more about him. Waiter, put the vegetarian food on my tab. Song Qing-shu called the waiter. If he wanted to get information, he had to find an opportunity. The old Taoist was a little surprised and bowed slightly. Thank you, young master. Are you here to participate in the Wu-Tang Mountain Sect leader succession ceremony? Song Qing-shu took the opportunity to ask. In his heart, he felt that this Taoist priest was somewhat familiar. The old Taoist was a little surprised, but he still answered, Yes, young master. Why are you here? He also felt that it was a little strange. The young man in front of him seemed familiar. Had he seen him somewhere before? Song Qing-shu smiled slightly. I'm also here to participate in the inauguration ceremony. The old Taoist looked at him doubtfully. Strange, Jinrenzhong did not invite other martial artists this time. He only asked these people from Wudong to be witnesses. Song Qing-shu was stunned. No wonder he did not hear about it. Zhang Sanfeng deliberately kept a low profile. But thinking about it, he was now old and did not care about the world. He did not want to have anything to do with the big sects in the martial world. Not to mention that on his 100th birthday, Zhang Chuishan and his wife were forced to death by the six big sections. A happy event became a funeral. He probably did not want to invite other sects to the mountain. Taoist priest, are you also from the Wu-Tang branch? Song Qing-shu asked curiously. Before the old Taoist could answer, a Taoist priest at the side had already proudly introduced. Of course, our master is the master of Baiyun Temple, one of the 5 temples of Wudong. So it's Taoist Yucha. Sorry for not recognizing you. Song Qing-shu finally remembered his identity. The Wu-Tang branch had a long history. In recent years, it had spread out, and the temples could be said to be all over the world. Among them, the most famous were the 5 temples. The Purple Cloud Palace of Wudong Mountain was the headquarters, which had a high status. There is also the Jinwu Temple, whose master was Taoist Chong Su, the Baiyun Temple, whose master was Taoist Yucha, Shangqing Temple, whose master was Taoist Tiansu. The famous black and white swords in the martial world also came from Shangqing Temple. The last one was the Jade Clear Temple, whose master was Ma Jun. The Manchurian master Zhang Zhaozhong was also from this sect. Li Yuanji's master, Lu Feiqing, was also from this sect. Among the 5 temples, except for the direct descendants of Zhang Sanfeng in the Purple Cloud Palace, the one with the best martial arts was Chong Su and the Silly Tea Taoist. A few decades ago, Silly Tea Taoist was even more famous. His magic sword was on par with Master Miaoti of Shaolin Temple. However, he basically didn't show up in the martial world these years, so people gradually forgot about his fame. Song Qing-shu's heart skipped a beat. Others might not know, but he knew where he had been all these years. Most of the time, he was studying the supreme mystery scripture with Miaoti on the Isle of Heroes. He rarely left the island. Now that he was here, it was most likely the Isle of Heroes instruction. Thinking of Jia Shi Dao behind the Isle of Heroes and the Mansion of Spirits he had heard in Chengdu, Song Qing-shu didn't believe that he was just here to watch the ceremony. However, even if he suspected, he didn't have any evidence. Silly T was a highly respected senior in the martial world. Even Zhang, Sanfeng couldn't do anything to Silly T just because of his words. "May I know who you are?" Silly T couldn't help but ask. He couldn't see through the young man in front of him at all. He was full of flaws, as if he was a playboy who had never practiced martial arts. However, the unique temperament and calmness of the young man couldn't be faked. The two completely different feelings made Silly T feel that the young man in front of him was unfathomable. "I am Song Qing Shu," Song Qing Shu answered with a smile. Silly T was shocked. He sat up straight and said, "You are the Golden Snake King. My apologies." People in the imperial court usually called him the King of Qi, but people in the martial world still called him the Golden Snake King. In fact, as one of the 5 temple masters, he was at the same level as Song Qing Shu. In terms of seniority, he was even higher than Song Yuanxiao. As Song Yuanxiao's son, Song Qing Shu was definitely his junior. It was a pity that Song Qing Shu had been famous in the martial world for the past 2 years. He was so famous in the martial world that almost no one dared to call themselves a senior in front of him. Silly T naturally wouldn't be arrogant. Song Qing Shu smiled and asked, "When will the ceremony begin?" Silly T replied, "The ceremony will be held tomorrow. I was delayed by some matters, so I came a little late. After I finish my meal, I will have to hurry up the mountain. I'm afraid I won't make it in time." "It's actually tomorrow?" Song Qing Shu blushed with shame. He was fooling around with Shun Bijuan on the ship and forgot about the sun and moon. Luckily, their fooling around did not affect the speed of the ship. In addition, they had been riding at full speed for the past few days. If something happened, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The two chatted for a while more. Song Qing Shu stood up and returned to his table. Before he left, he looked at the two effeminate Taoists beside Silly T and asked, "Did we know each other before?" One of the Taoists turned his head and ignored him. The other Taoist replied coldly, "What kind of person is young master? How could you know us?" After confirming that he had never heard his voice before, Song Qing Shu nodded. "If you don't know us, why did you stare at me?" "Who stared at you?" The Taoist snorted. Song Qing Shu smiled. "It's best that you didn't. You should focus on cultivation. Don't think about all this nonsense all day. I don't like men." He laughed and returned to Shun Bijuan's table. The Taoist was furious. He wanted to grab the sword next to him and get up, but Silly T pressed him down with his horsetail whisk. "Don't be impatient." Only then did the young Taoist sit down resentfully. In the end, he saw the lips of another young Taoist beside him curling up slightly. He couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. "You're still smiling?" "I'm not. You're obviously smiling." Shin Bijuan couldn't help but whisper to Song Qing Shu, "Those Taoists are a little strange." Song Qing Shu felt the same way. Not only are they strange, they're perverted. Never mind, let's not care about them. Let's finish our meal and continue our journey. Chapter 1925. As they were in a hurry, they finished their meal quickly. When they left, they bumped into the people from Baiyun Temple. Song Qing Shu decided to walk with them. They chatted as they reached the foot of Mount Wudang. Unfortunately, no matter how much Song Qing Shu inquired, he could not find any valuable information from the other party's words. In addition, there were many people in Baiyun Temple, so the journey could not be fast. He simply bade farewell to the other party and said, "I want to see Grandmaster and my father first, so I will bid farewell here." Stupid T did not stop him. He smiled. "If that's the case, we will meet again at the Purple Cloud Palace." Song Qing Shu nodded. He gently wrapped his arm around Shun Bijuan's waist and stepped forward. He didn't seem to use much strength, but in just a few steps, the two of them had disappeared into the forest. Stupid T was shocked. This person is just as the rumors say. His martial arts are unfathomable. When the two Taoists snorted, "He is just showing off in front of the beauty. Don't be fooled." Stupid T said, "His reputation is not for nothing. We should not be careless. With him, this mission will not be as smooth." The two Taoists looked at each other and saw the complicated look in each other's eyes. They did not say anything. After Song Qing Shu went up the mountain, he did not go through the sword dissecting stone. Even though he did not carry any weapons, It would be too troublesome to wait for the disciples to report to him. He might as well take the small path up the mountain. Song Qing-shu sighed inwardly as he felt the wind in the forest and gazed at the clouds in the distance. He was clearly a Wu-Tang sect's third-generation disciple. But to be honest, this was the first time he had come to Wu-Tang Mountain ever since he came to this world. In an instant, hundreds of feelings welled up in his heart, and he could not help but be stunned. Shinbijuan was also uneasy at this time. Song Lang, when I see great hero Song, what identity should I use to greet him? Even though she had promised to marry him, they were not married yet. Moreover, everyone knew that Song Qingshu's first wife was Zhou Zhuo from the Amei sect. Her identity was awkward. Song Qingshu was speechless. What great hero Song! When the time comes, call me eunuch. Eunuch? Shin Bijuan's face turned red, but she was extremely happy inside. She had been worrying about many things on the way here, but now that she saw that he had no intention of intentionally hiding their relationship in front of her father, all of her worries vanished like smoke in thin air. But when the time comes, I'll have to pay my respects to the Grand Preceptor, Song Qingshu added. On Mount Wudong, Zhang Sanfeng was the absolute elder. Furthermore, compared to Song Yuan Xiao, who was his father, Zhang Sanfeng's bearing and demeanor were much more admirable. Shin Bijuan pursed her lips into a smile. I've long heard that Taoist Master Tong Wei is an immortal of the earth. To be able to see him this time is an opportunity that all the young masters and misses of Jiangnan can't even dream of. Speaking of which, I'm even basking in Song Lang's light. Zhang Sanfeng was renowned throughout the world. Moreover, he was now over 100 years old. It was unknown how many emperors he had experienced in his life. Whether it was the Song dynasty or the previous Ming dynasty, the emperors of each generation had bestowed upon him various honorific titles, such as the Loyal and Filial Immortal, the 6 ancestors of the Yulong Dragon, hidden in the immortal abode of nothingness. True immortal, keeping a low profile. Perfected Lord Qingshu Yuan Miao. Among the Flying Dragon manifestation, Hongra and Jieshir Zhenjuan. The most popular one in the Jiangnan area was Tongwei manifestation Zhenren. Song Qingshu laughed and said, "You're such a sweet talker. I'm sure Grandmaster will like such a beautiful and smart granddaughter-in-law." The two of them chatted as they made their way to the top of the mountain. Very soon, a Wudong disciple noticed them and asked, "Who are you?" Wudong Mountain is going to hold a grand ceremony soon, and we are not accepting any visitors. They saw that the man had an imposing appearance and the woman was a peerless beauty, so they thought that they were the sons of rich families and the daughters of rich families. After all, for the past few years, there had been an endless stream of rich and powerful children who came to visit Wudong in order to touch the immortal air. Song Qingshu cupped his hands and said, "Please pass the message that I'm Song Qingshu and I have something important to discuss with Spiritual Master Zhang." Song Qingshu? I've never heard of it. The sect leader has ordered that the mountain is sealed and no one is allowed to enter or leave. The few little Taoists waved their hands impatiently. Shin Bijuan couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. Looks like you're not that famous after all. Song Qingshu, on the other hand, frowned slightly. Could it be that something had happened inside? Could it be that the people from a mansion of spirits had already taken control of the people inside? Just as he was about to rush in, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. Who's making a ruckus here? Following that, a slightly chubby middle-aged Taoist walked over. His hair was slightly white, and he had a modest and refined air about him. Song Qingshu's expression became somewhat interesting, but he still bowed and said, "Father, it's me." Shin Bijuan's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this calm and refined middle-aged Taoist to be Song Yuan Xiao. Caught off guard, she couldn't help but panic when she saw her future father-in-law. She subconsciously said, "Bijuan greets father." Song Yuan Xiao also recognized Song Qingshu and couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. "So it's Qingshu." Before he could finish speaking, he heard a beautiful young girl call him father. He couldn't help but jump in fright. "Miss," Shin Bijuan finally reacted and was instantly embarrassed. How could she say anything else? She instinctively hid behind Song Qing-shu, her head almost touching the ground. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but smile. "Father, let me introduce you. This is your daughter-in-law." "Another daughter-in-law?" Song Yuanxiao's expression was a little unnatural. After all, the last daughter-in-law, Zhou Zhuo, had not brought happy memories to the Wudang sect. At the lion-slaying festival, Yu Daiyin and Yin Lighting had almost lost their lives to Zhou Zhuo's 9 Yin white-bone claws. He quickly dispelled those thoughts in his mind. After all, these were all things of the past. Furthermore, this person in front of him looked gentle and demure, so it didn't seem likely. But then again, Zhou Zhuo had also been gentle like this in the beginning. Seeing Song Yuanxiao standing there in a daze, Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Although she is very beautiful, Father, you don't have to be so stunned, right?" Song Yuanxiao's old face turned red. He subconsciously reached out and pinched his ear. "You bastard, you even dare to tease your father." With Song Qingshu's current level of martial arts, there was no way that Song Yuanxiao would be able to pinch his ear. However, for some reason, he did not dodge. The familiar yet distant pain that came from his ear reminded him of his family from his previous life, and a trace of warmth rose in his heart. Song Yuanxiao suddenly noticed that Shun Bijuan was silently crying. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded. "That? Bijuan, don't cry. It was my fault just now. I didn't react in time and neglected you." He thought about how a girl had come to pay her respects to her father-in-law, but he had ignored her. This must have made her feel uneasy. It was really a sin, a sin. Shin Bijuan hurriedly wiped away her tears and explained, reporting, "Great hero Song, it's not like that. It's just that when I saw you father and son fighting, I thought of my parents and felt a little sad." "What? In alliance? Dark? Yeah?" Gongmuyu Song Qingshu hurriedly gave a rough account of her past. Song Yuanxiao couldn't help but feel sympathetic. "Bijuan, from now on, you will be like a member of our family. If Qingshu bullies you, I will beat him up for you." Song Qingshu rolled his eyes. "Don't brag if you can, with your little martial arts." Although he didn't finish his sentence, the disdain in his words was clear. Song Yuanxiao knew that he was speaking the truth, but he felt a little embarrassed in front of his daughter-in-law. "You stinking brat, you've grown up, haven't you? You dare to fight back when your father hits you?" Shin Bijuan couldn't help but smile through her tears. She hurriedly stepped forward to diffuse the situation. "Uncle Song, Qingshu treats me very well. He has never bullied me." Song Yuanxiao snorted. "That's more like it." Chapter 1926. Shin Bijuan's face reddened. After a moment of hesitation, she bowed and said softly, "Bijuan greets father. No need to be so courteous. We're all family. Please rise." Song Yuanxiao gestured for her to rise. After thinking for a moment, he took out a bracelet from his sleeve. "I shouldn't have given this to you, but Qingshu's mother passed away early. She said she wanted to give this bracelet to her daughter-in-law." Song Qingshu's original wife had been Zhou Zhuo, but back then, Zhou Zhuo and Song Qingshu had been hastily married at the Amei sect. No one from the Wudong sect had been there. Of course, at that time, Song Qingshu had already betrayed the Wudong sect, so they couldn't have been there. Everyone knew about Zhou Zhuo's relationship with Zhang Wuji. As her father, Song Yuanxiao actually didn't approve of this marriage. In addition, Zhou Zhuo had almost killed Yu Lianzhou and Yin Lighting at the lion-slaying festival, so the bracelet had always been with Song Yuanxiao. "Thank you, father." Shin Bijuan was overjoyed. This bracelet wasn't dark green, and the color wasn't pure. As the eldest daughter of the Shun family, she had seen many more expensive bracelets than this, but in her eyes, all of them added together couldn't compare to this one. Song Qingshu felt a headache coming on. If other women found out, who knew what would happen? Even if he didn't say it, it was inevitable that they would think about it. He finally understood the troubles of the rich people in the Middle East. Although the law allowed them to marry 4 wives at the same time, they had to treat all of them equally. If they bought something for one of them, they couldn't leave out the other 3. At this time, Song Yuanxiao was also vexed. Originally, after stepping down from the position of acting sect leader, he had been focusing on cultivation. But in recent years, Song Qingshu's reputation had risen. While he was comforted, he had also been collecting information about his son. Naturally, he knew about his son's philandering. Looks like I'll have to find the jade craftsman at the foot of the mountain to make a few more bracelets in case I need them. This brat, he really doesn't let me rest easy. After chatting for a while, Song Qingshu got down to business. By the way, did anything happen on the mountain recently? Song Yuanxiao was confused. No, why do you ask? Song Qingshu did not answer. Instead, he turned around and looked at the few Taoist priests who had stopped him earlier. Are they new here? Song Yuanxiao replied. He can't be considered a newcomer. He's a fourth-generation disciple that was accepted in recent years. Song Qingshu furrowed his brows. Then how can they not know me? He was worried that these people were from the Mansion of Spirits in disguise. Song Yuanxiao explained. They just entered the sect 2 years ago. And as you know, ever since you made a mistake, I retreated to the second line. Your name has gradually become a taboo in the entire Wu-Tang Mountain. It's normal that they don't know about you. Song Qingshu sighed. Father, it's all because of me that you're in trouble. If his son had not accidentally killed Muo Xingu, Song Yuanxiao would have been the rightful sect leader of Wu-Tang. Now that he had been forced to step down, it must be because of his son. Song Yuanxiao shook his head. Not at all. Even though you did something wrong, it's a good thing to know your mistakes. These years, you've retreated to the Qing dynasty and saved the princess in the Jin kingdom. You've done good to the people. Even Master is full of praise for you. After praising his son, Song Yuanxiao could not hide the pride on his face. But when he thought of his seventh junior brother, he could not help but sigh. Since you're back, your seventh uncle's grave is just up ahead. Remember to burn some incense and kowtow to apologize. Back then, Muo Xingu's body had been left in the wilderness. The people of Wu-Tang had collected it and moved it back to the Wu-Tang Mountain. I know. Song Qingshu's heart was also heavy. Even though Muo Xingu's death had nothing to do with him, since he had inherited Song Qingshu's identity, he had to bear his responsibilities. The three of them quickly arrived at a pine forest. Muo Xingu's grave was right in the middle of the forest. It looked sad and lonely. Song Qingshu sighed and walked up to burn some incense. Then, he respectfully kowtowed a few times. Even though Shen Bijuan did not know what was going on, she still followed his lead and kowtowed a few times. At this point, words were useless. Neither Song Qingshu nor Song Yuanxiao said anything. After a long time, they finally left with a heavy heart. All right, why did you suddenly return to Wu-Tang Mountain? Song Yuanxiao was the first to break the silence. Song Qingshu hurriedly recounted what had happened in Chengdu. Because he could not explain to him that he had read Gulong's novel and knew that the Mansion of Spirits would harm Wu-Tang Mountain, he had come to take a look. So, he pretended that he had received reliable information that someone wanted to harm Wu-Tang sect during the ceremony. Song Yuanxiao knew that his influence was not to be underestimated. His information network was naturally better than that of the average martial arts sect. He did not dare to be careless. Come with me to see Master immediately. Oh, right. Who will be participating in the ceremony? Song Qingshu asked on the way. It can't really be considered a ceremony, Song Yuanxiao replied. Master has been enjoying peace and quiet recently, so he did not invite the major martial arts sections. He only gathered the people from the various Taoist temples of Wu-Tang to be witnesses. Taoist Master Chong Su of Zhenwu Temple, Taoist Master Tian Su of Shangqing Temple, Taoist Master Ma Zhen of Jade Temple, and Taoist Master Yucha of White Cloud Temple have not arrived yet. The others have already arrived. Are they the only ones? Song Qingshu asked. Even though these people were all famous martial arts masters, even if they were to work together, they would not be able to deal with Wu-Tang's sect. There was no need for Zhang Sanfeng to make a move. The 5 heroes of Wu-Tang would be enough to deal with them. Song Yuanxiao explained. Other than these temple masters and their followers, there are also some other branches of Wu-Tang. For example, Taoist Huangmu of the Xiandu sect, Taoist Huangmu? Song Qing-shu had a strange look on his face. Taoist Huangmu and Taoist Mu were only one word apart. Could there be some connection between them? Is there a problem with him? Song Yuanxiao was also surprised to see such a big reaction from him. The Xiandu sect is only a small branch of Wu-Tang. Back then, the 14th-generation leader of the Xiandu sect, Taoist Jutan, was once taught a few sword techniques by your great master. From then on, his sword techniques improved greatly, and he admired your great master from the bottom of his heart. Unfortunately, he was too arrogant and killed many people. He made too many enemies. In the end, all the swordsmen gathered at Mount Hung and fought him one by one. Although Taoist Ju Tan injured 18 people with his sword, he was exhausted and seriously injured in the end. So he pulled out his dagger and committed suicide. The people of the martial arts world remembered their friendship with Wu-Tang sect and did not kill the Xiandu sect after the incident. Therefore, the Xiandu sect submitted to Wu-Tang sect and became a branch of her sect. As Song Qing-shu listened, he was filled with admiration. In the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber, Zhang Sanfeng's first appearance was the posture of the world's number one. There was almost no description of his deeds when he was young. However, with the identity of an abandoned disciple of Shaolin Temple, in the end, he relied on one fist and one sword to defeat the huge Wu-Tang sect, keeping pace with Shaolin Temple. Although Song Yuanxiao did not say much, he could feel Zhang Sanfeng's spirit in the past. With a few words of advice, he could make a third-rate sect leader become a top master. And because of these words, the people of Jianghu did not dare to make things difficult for this sect. Where did this Taoist Huangmu come from? Although Song Qing-shu knew a little about the Golden Book world, he only knew some famous people. The whole Jianghu was so big. How could he know everything? Speaking of which, it has something to do with you, Song Yuanxiao said with a smile. Chapter 1927. Aren't you Golden Snake King? Song Yuanxiao explained. Back then, Priest Huangmu and Golden Snake Prince were good friends. Later, because of Golden Snake Prince, he was captured by the Five Poison sect and imprisoned for more than 10 years. Later, when Yuan Qingji broke into the Five Poison sect, he was rescued by his disciples. Song Qing-shu vaguely remembered that Jiao Weiner's Golden Dragon Gang had been forced into a corner by Min Zihua and the others from Xindu sect. Now that he thought about it, the martial arts of those from Xindu sect were actually not that good. This priest Huangmu had been imprisoned by the Five Poison sect for more than 10 years, so his martial arts must not be that good. Now that he was reminded of Jiao Weiner, and thinking about how nervous he was when he was almost discovered by Luo Liru in her room, Song Qing-shu could not help but sigh that he had been too reckless in the past few years. After this, he no longer suspected this priest Huangmu. After all, his martial arts were far inferior to that of the wooden Taoist from the Mansion of Spirits. Is there anyone else? Song Qing-shu continued to ask. There are a few other sections. When your great master traveled the world, he was very helpful to the people of Taoism. Many people were indebted to him for a few pointers, so Wudong is quite a number of branches. Song Yuanxiao explained which sects had come to the mountain this time. Song Qing-shu listened carefully for a long time, but in the end, he felt that this was suspicious. That was also suspicious, but no one was really suspicious. Song Qing-shu personally led the way. Song Qing-shu's dignified appearance was one thing, but Shin Bijuan was unbelievably beautiful. Many of the young Taoists on the mountain felt like they had been struck by lightning when they saw her, and all of them blushed and speechless. Song Qing-shu could not help but laugh. These young Taoists are not clean. Song Yuanxiao's face turned red. He felt that these people had brought shame to Wudong's sect. Their martial arts are shallow, so of course their willpower is weaker. Find a chance to let second brother teach them a lesson. As he spoke, he glared at the juniors by the side of the road, scaring them so much that they scattered in all directions. The commotion here soon attracted the attention of the other heroes. Yu Yinzhou and the others heard the commotion and rushed over. When they recognized Song Qing-shu, they could not help but be surprised and delighted. Qing-shu, why are you here? Even though Song Qing-shu and the Wudong sect had some discord in the past, Song Qingshu's actions in the past few years could be considered to have brought benefits to the sect. Even Zhang Sanfeng had praised him several times. Moreover, when the Wudong heroes were trapped in the Jin Kingdom, they were indebted to him for saving them. Song Qingshu had Shen Bijuan greet her uncles as he explained the reason for their visit. Hearing this, their expressions changed several times, and they hastily went to his master's secluded residence in the bamboo forest. The few of them quickly arrived at the small courtyard at the back of the mountain. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. "There are guests in the Grand Preceptor's room?" Yu Yanzhou answered, "It's Priest Chong Su." At the same time, he couldn't help but admire him for being able to sense that there were other people in the room from such a far distance. This kind of power was really shocking. Song Qingshu was relieved because Zhao Min and her people almost annihilated the Wudong sect in the past. He was worried that Zhang Sanfeng would be plotted against again. However, when he heard that there was a void Chong Su in the room, he felt relieved. Even though he had a few grudges with Chong Su in the past, to be honest, there was absolutely no problem with Chong Su's character. Besides, he was also the only one among the 5 sects in the Wudong sect other than the 7 heroes who received Zhang Sanfeng's teachings. The others only received a few pointers from Zhang Sanfeng at most, but Chong Su received the complete inheritance of the Taiji sword. Even though he didn't have a name of a disciple, he had the reality of being a disciple. How could a person with such a good background do anything that would harm the Wudong sect? "May I know which expert has come to visit our sect?" The door of the room slowly opened. In a trance, everyone seemed to hear a celestial music playing. A Taoist with the demeanor of an immortal slowly walked out. Song Yuan Xiao and the others hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Master." Yu Yanzhou took the opportunity to say, "It's Qingshu who has returned." At this time, Zhang Sanfeng had already seen Song Qingshu. He couldn't help but laugh, returning from the real to the void, returning from the real to the simple. "I was wondering which hidden expert had come. I didn't expect it to be you. Ever since we parted last time, Qingshu's power seems to have improved quite a bit." When the Wudong heroes heard this, they were both impressed and amazed. They were impressed that their master's power was so profound that he was able to sense the arrival of a top-notch expert, even though they were separated by a room. They were also amazed that Song Qingshu's martial arts could actually be so highly praised by their master. It could be assumed that at that time, there were probably very few people who could be a match for him. Song Qingshu hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, great master. This little trick of mine is only the light of a firefly. How can it compare to the brilliance of the great master's bright moon?" Zhang Sanfeng couldn't help but stroke his snow-white beard. "Your father is modest and dull, but you little brat are actually very slippery." As he was speaking, he noticed Shen Bijuan, who was standing to the side. He couldn't help but say in surprise, "This young lady." Song Qingshu hurriedly pulled Shen Bijuan over. "Greetings, great master." With so many elders present, not to mention the fact that they were facing a legendary immortal, Shen Bijuan's heart was beating wildly. She hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Bijuan greets, great master." Zhang Sanfeng's smile froze for a moment. He was already over 100 years old, so he could tell at a glance the relationship between the two of them. He thought back to the time when he was still in the Golden Snake Battalion. He had even officiated the wedding between him and Miss Run of the Sun Moon sect. He didn't expect that this time he would actually bring back a different and equally beautiful young lady. Sigh, if I had this ability when I was young, I wouldn't have kept the bronze Arhood in my bosom for 100 years. Zhang Sanfeng was after all an extraordinary person. After so many years, he had already let go of these things in his early years. After a moment of shock, he reacted, "Young lady, please rise." He didn't seem to move at all, but Shen Bijuan suddenly felt a gentle force lifting her up. She couldn't help but feel a great sense of respect for this kind and benevolent elder. At this time, Song Qingshu saw Chong Su, who was standing next to Zhang Sanfeng. He hurriedly bowed. "This nephew greets great master Chong Su. If I have offended you in the past, please don't take it to heart." Chong Su was older than the 7 heroes of Wudong, and he could be considered a good friend of Zhang Sanfeng. That was why Zhang Sanfeng taught him martial arts, but didn't take him as a disciple. According to seniority, he was definitely worthy of this bow. Chong Su smiled. Qing Shu is too serious. I'm truly ashamed to say this. Back then, when I lost to you at the summit of Mount Tai, I was still a little unconvinced after thinking about it. But after seeing your martial arts getting better and better over the years, my unconvinced feeling has long since turned into admiration. Back then, this nephew was young and frivolous. Moreover, I used a cheap trick first. It doesn't count. Song Qingshu secretly admired Chong Su. As expected, Chong Su was a very magnanimous and calm person. No wonder even the arrogant Run Wuxing admired him so much in the original work. Chong Su smiled. A loss is a loss. How can there be a cheap trick or not? What's more, it was only later that I found out that you didn't hesitate to ruin your own reputation in order to assassinate the Qing Emperor. My heart was left with only admiration. Chapter 1928. Everyone was shocked. With Zhang Sanfeng's cultivation and status in martial arts, he didn't even need to do anything. Sending his disciples was enough to solve most things. The few times he fought, he defeated his enemies with one move. Many people in Jianghu guessed how high his martial arts level was, but they could only describe him with one word: unfathomable. Such a person actually proposed to fight with a junior. Obviously, he already regarded the other person as an opponent of the same level. How could they not be shocked? With a bitter smile, Song Qingshu said, Tai Shifu's Taiji sword has already opened up an unprecedented martial arts style. How can my three-legged cat martial arts skill break it? Moreover, Qingshu has come here this time to tell you something that concerns the survival of Wudong. Zhang Sanfeng wanted to laugh at him when he heard his flattery, but when he heard the last sentence, he suddenly became serious and asked, "What is it?" Only then did Song Qingshu roughly explain what had happened in the Mansion of Spirits. The Mansion of Spirits? Zhang Sanfeng fell into deep thought. I have never heard of this organization. Even with Zhang Sanfeng's knowledge, he had never heard of it, which meant that this organization probably didn't exist before. It should be a mysterious organization that was established in the past 2 years, Song Qingshu explained. I hope I am overthinking, but we should all be careful. Also, Song Qingshu hesitated and continued. I am actually worried that the stupid tea Taoist of the Baiyun Temple might be related to the Mansion of Spirits. The others couldn't help but whisper. Not only was stupid tea a famous person for decades, but he also had a very high status in the Wudang system. Thinking that such a person was related to the Mansion of Spirits, everyone felt that it was a bit unbelievable. Zhang Sanfeng's expression changed. Qingshu, why do you say that? Song Qingshu said, what I'm going to say next is top secret information. Once it is leaked, it will cause a lot of trouble. I hope you all can keep it confidential. Of course. The warriors of Wudang and Chong Su saw that he was serious, so they all nodded. 30 years ago, Silly T joined the Island of Heroes. The Island of Heroes is controlled by Jia Sherdao. According to my information, Ghost Mountain Manor is most likely related to Jia Sherdao, Song Qingshu said. So Jia Sherdao is behind the Isle of Heroes. No wonder, no wonder. Everyone present was from the Jianghu, so they naturally knew about the Island of Heroes. The Island of Heroes had always been mysterious, and everyone had been guessing what was going on. Now that they knew that Jia Sherdao, who was extremely powerful, was behind the Island of Heroes, they suddenly understood why the Island of Heroes was so powerful. No wonder foolish Tea Taoist has been elusive all these years. Rumor has it that he was invited by the Isle of Heroes. I didn't believe it at first, but I didn't expect it to be true. Chong Su was filled with emotions. After all, Stupid T's martial arts was very high, and he had the backing of the Wudang sect. He could totally resist the messenger of rewarding kindness and punishing evil from the Isle of Heroes. Song Qingshu continued, not long ago, I met people from the Baiyun Temple in the town at the foot of the mountain. However, I tried many times, but I couldn't find any valuable information. Zhang Songshi, one of the 4 heroes, said, I've long heard that foolish T Daoist's sword skills are superb. Why don't we find a chance to test him and see if he has learned any new martial arts in the Island of Heroes? Yulian Zhou, the second hero, nodded and said, "It's good to test him, but this time it's not convenient for Big Brother and I to do anything." Among the 7 heroes of the Wu-Dang sect, Yu Lianzhou and Song Yuanxiao were the best. He was about to take over as the leader of the Wu-Dang sect, so he naturally couldn't do anything. Song Yuanxiao, as the eldest disciple of the Wu-Dang sect, represented the Purple Cloud Palace for a long time. If he accidentally lost to Foolish T, the Purple Cloud Palace would be humiliated. The other heroes, such as Zhang Songshi and Yin Lighting, had no problem with their identities, but their martial arts were a bit weaker, so they might not be able to find anything. While they were struggling, Chong-Su said, "Let me test him." Yulian Zhou was overjoyed. "Then I'll have to trouble you, Daoist." Song Qingshu also nodded secretly. Chong-Su's martial arts were also top-notch in the Jianghu. He was on par with Foolish T, so he was the most suitable person to test him. At this moment, a disciple came to report that the people of Baiyun Temple had arrived at the Purple Cloud Palace. Yulian Zhou then led everyone to welcome them. Originally, Zhang Sanfeng didn't have to welcome them personally, but after hearing Song Qingshu's words, he was curious about Foolish T, so he followed them. The people of Baiyun Temple didn't expect Zhang Sanfeng to come personally. Foolish T Daoist hurriedly led all the disciples to greet Zhang Sanfeng. Song Qingshu was secretly impressed. Zhang Sanfeng really had students all over the world. No wonder he was called a legend of the martial arts world. At the same time, he also saw the chief of Shangqing Temple, Taoist Tianxiu, and the chief of Yuqing Temple, Ma Zhen. When everyone knew his identity, they were all shocked. One should know that Song Qingshu was not only famous for his top-notch martial arts in the Jianghu, he was also the king of Qi, who controlled 1,000 miles of fertile land and had 100,000 soldiers. Because of his relationship with Li Yuanji, Song Qingshu was quite polite to Ma Zhen, making Ma Zhen feel flattered. After the group of people chatted for a while, Chong-Su found a chance to say to Foolish T, "I've long heard that Senior Martial Brother's sword skills are superb. Coincidentally, I've reached a bottleneck in my sword skills. I wonder if I can spar with Senior Martial Brother. I might be able to break through the bottleneck in one go." The people of Wu-Dang knew about it beforehand, so they naturally cheered. Although Tianxiu and Ma Zhen felt that Chong-Su's action was a little sudden, it was reasonable. Moreover, they were all people of the Jianghu, so they were naturally happy to see 2 great sword masters spar, so they all agreed. Foolish T politely wanted to decline, but it was hard for him to reject such hospitality, so he finally agreed. The group of people came to the drill ground outside of the Purple Cloud Palace. Chong-Su and Foolish T stood opposite each other. Foolish T smiled. "Please, Senior Martial Brother, be careful." Chong-Su originally wanted to test his strength, so he did not decline. He slowly turned his body to the right, raised his sword with his left hand, and placed it horizontally in front of his chest. His left and right palms faced each other, as if he was hugging a ball. The rest of the people saw that even before he drew his sword, he had already accumulated his strength. Ma Zhen and Tianxiu looked at each other and could not help but admire him. They thought that it was no wonder that Chong-Su Zhenwu Temple was able to suppress them in the Jianghu. His sword skills were indeed above the 2 of them. Foolish T slowly drew his sword forward, forming an arc. The surrounding people could only feel a gust of cold air pressing towards them. Song Qingshu's eyebrows twitched. No wonder the people of the Jianghu praised his sword skills to be superb. It seemed that he was indeed the best in the Jianghu. Chong-Su said, "Excuse me." As he finished, he pointed his sword at the air and tried to attack his opponent. He only used 30% of his strength in this move. The remaining 70% was ready to strike. With a flash of cold light, Foolish T slashed his sword towards his neck. This move was so fast that the surrounding people could not help but cheer. None of the people present were mediocre. They could tell that although this move was dangerous, it was not meant to kill. Chong-Su had already seen a flaw on his opponent's side. He stabbed his sword towards the Yuan Yi point on his side. Foolish T's sword was raised vertically. With a clang, the two swords clashed. Both of them took a step back. Chong-su felt that there was a strange force on his opponent's sword. It shook his right arm until it was slightly numb. Stupid T also let out a sound. His face was slightly surprised. Zhang Sanfeng stood with his hands behind his back. At this moment, he took the opportunity to ask Song Qing-shu, "Qing-shu, who do you think will win this battle?" Song Qing-shu frowned and said, "I have fought with Priest Chong-su before. I know his level of martial arts. However, I don't know the level of Priest Foolish T. Now that both of them have not fought much, I really can't make a judgment." Zhang Sanfeng smiled. Both of their sword skills are almost the same. However, Chong-su's sword skills are more focused on defense. Now that he is testing his opponent, he has to attack first. It is inevitable that he will reveal a flaw. I'm afraid that it will be disadvantageous to him. Song Qing-shu was stunned. He thought about it carefully and felt that it made a lot of sense. He could not help but admire Zhang Sanfeng. Although his martial arts skills were high, compared to Zhang Sanfeng's 100 years of experience, his eyesight and experience were still a little lacking. The conversation between the two of them was completely through telepathy. There was no need to worry that the people around them could hear them. It also did not affect the mentality of both of them. He switched the Chong-su sword to his left hand and drew 2 circles in front of him. Among the people of Baiyun Temple, the 2 young Taoists who looked at Song Qing-shu with a strange gaze previously in the inn could not help but whisper, "The power of the sword is continuous and protects his whole body. There is no gap at all. The Tai Chi sword created by Zhang Sanfeng is really extraordinary." The other slightly younger Taoist shook his head slightly. That may not be true. Although he used his sword to protect his front, there must be a flaw behind him. The slightly older Taoist smiled and said, "If other people attack his back, his sword will move back, and naturally he can protect his back. Do you think that everyone can attack his front and back at the same time like you?" The young Taoist said lightly, "If one's body movement is quick and agile, he can move around and attack his surroundings continuously. As the saying goes, a long defense is bound to be lost. In the end, he can still break through his defense. Cousin, your wave-like subtle steps is just right to deal with him." The older Taoist hurriedly pinched him. "Shush, I've already told you to call me senior brother. Don't let others hear you and expose your identity." The entire arena was spacious, and there were many people in the arena. Many of them were whispering to each other and discussing, adding to the fact that the sound of the sword clashing was not soft. Even though Zhang Sanfeng and Song Qing-shu's martial arts were high, they did not pay attention to their conversation. They only saw Silly T's left hand pinching the sword formula. The sword in his right hand trembled continuously. Suddenly, he stabbed horizontally. The tip of the sword trembled rapidly. This move of his covered Chong-su's 7 major acupoints. The Tai Chi sword was originally used to defend and attack. When Silly T attacked, Chong-su had already seen 3 flaws in his body. He then pointed his long sword calmly at Silly T's left eyebrow. If Silly T continued to stab forward, his left forehead would be hit first. By the time the tip of the sword stabbed himself, it would already be too late. Who knew that before Silly T's sword move was completed, it suddenly changed into a completely different move. The sword in his hand shone brightly. Chong-su could only feel his vision blurring. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He hurriedly pulled back his sword to defend himself. A few halos appeared in front of him, and his body was already hidden in the halos. The crowd applauded. The 5 heroes of Wu Dang looked at each other and felt ashamed. As the direct disciples of Zhang Sanfeng, their attainments in the Tai Chi sword were probably still lacking compared to Chong-su. Chapter 1929. Before one of the halos disappeared, another one appeared in front of the Void Chong Master. Even though the sword was moving at an extremely fast speed, there was no sound of the blade cutting through the air. It was obvious that the sword force had reached the state of perfection. Stupid T frowned. He could no longer see the gaps in his opponent's sword technique. He only felt as if there were thousands of swords protecting his body. He sighed in his heart. The Tai Chi sword technique really lived up to its name. He had great attainments in sword technique. He understood that his opponent's defense was flawless. However, once he attacked, there would definitely be a gap. He planned to wait for his opponent to exhaust himself. However, the fortress formed by his opponent's swords seemed to be able to move. Thousands of halos surged towards him like waves. The Void Chong Master did not attack with one move at a time. Instead, he used dozens of sword techniques to form a defense and attack at the same time. Stupid T was shocked. He could not defend himself and could only take a step back. Song Qingshu nodded in his heart. After they parted on Mount Tai, his Void Chong Master's sword technique had improved a lot. Each time Stupid T took a step back, the halos would take a step forward. In an instant, he had already taken 7 to 8 steps back. Even though Stupid T was reluctant to compete in the beginning, all swordsmen had their own pride. He had been famous for his sword technique for many years. How would he be willing to lose to a Void Chong Master in public? He thought about the battle on Mount Tai that year. Song Qingshu broke the Tai Chi sword technique of the Void Chong Master in one move. He could totally imitate it. His eyes fell on the brightest center of his opponent's halos. He raised his sword and stabbed towards it. However, when he was halfway through, he suddenly felt a tingling sensation on his arm. He knew that his opponent's sword wind had invaded his body. He suddenly realized, since a Void Chong Master was defeated by this move, why would he continue to leave this gap for others to take advantage of? He immediately made a decision. He changed his thrusting into a horizontal slash. Suddenly, he started to run around the Void Chong Master in a strange manner. Huh? What kind of Qin Gong is this? When the crowd saw him galloping like a horse, they were all confused. Only Song Qingshu understood that this was the Qin Gong from the murals on the Isle of Chivalry. Although it was not the real essence, it was still a very powerful Qin Gong. After running in this manner for who knew how many laps, suddenly there was a loud clang. The two swords had been inserted into a nearby pillar. The swords were still trembling and emitting bursts of dragon roars. Everyone looked back and realized that Stupid T and Chong Su were already empty-handed. They knew that the swords must have clashed, and they were both sent flying. Seeing that it was about time, Yu Lianzhou stepped forward to smooth things over. Senior brothers, your swordsmanship is indeed brilliant. You've really broadened our horizons. Chong Su and Fool T exchanged pleasantries. Song Qingshu, on the other hand, frowned slightly. One should know that the Tai Chi sword was the best at deflecting force. Chong Su's sword was knocked out of his hand by the opponent's force. It showed that Fool T's power was definitely above his. As for Silly T's own sword, it flew out too. It might not have been caused by the recoil, but it was probably faked. Glancing to the side, Zhang Sanfeng also looked over. The two of them exchanged glances for a moment. It was clear that both of them were thinking of the same thing. However, since things had come to this point, it would not be good to continue probing. He could only temporarily suppress the doubts in his heart. Coincidentally, it was getting late. Wu Dang had prepared a banquet to entertain all the guests. The banquet was filled with light dishes. However, most of the guests were cultivators, so they did not really care about it. Only Song Qingshu suffered. He thought that after tomorrow's event, he would have to leave the mountain as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would have to eat these things every day. Wouldn't his mouth be so bland? During the banquet, Song Qingshu also saw the guests from the other branches of Wudang. Among them, Taoist Huang Mu from Xiandu sect quickly caught his attention. Originally, he thought that as a third-rate sect like Xiandu sect, the martial arts of its disciples would not be that high. Who knew that Taoist Huang Mu's breathing and breathing technique seemed to have cultivated a very high level of Nigong. He was definitely not the weakling that he had imagined. He told this discovery to Song Yuanxiao, planning to find an opportunity to probe the other party. Song Yuanxiao shook his head and said, Taoist Huang Mu is after all a guest from afar. Right now, we do not have any evidence. If we go and make things difficult for him based on speculation, it will really damage Wu Dang's sect's reputation. After pausing for a moment, he continued, Let's say that even if there is something wrong with him, us martial brothers are not useless. Moreover, Master and you are here. What kind of waves can they stir up? Song Qingshu agreed. Although there were only 4 of the 7 heroes of Wu Dang left, they had been carefully trained by Zhang Sanfeng, in addition to dozens of years of bitter training. With their current level of martial arts, they were more than capable enough to become the leader of a major sect in the Jianghu. In addition, there was also Chong Su and Priest Ma Jun on the side to look after them. Even if he and Zhang Sanfeng did not make a move, it would be very difficult for the other party to stir up any big waves. After all, this time Wu Dang did not invite all the major sections. With this thought, he finally relaxed. After the meal, he took Shen Bijuan to see the scenery around Wu Dang Mountain. Thinking that this was the place where her lover grew up, Shen Bijuan was very happy. Along the way, she was very happy. However, she suddenly thought of something and her face became a bit worried. Is it not good for us to sneak out like this? Song Qingshu smiled and said, Don't worry. Now they have to prepare for tomorrow's ceremony. They're very busy. Great Master is worried that you will be neglected, so he specially sent me to be your guide so that you will feel at home. Great Master is really a good person. Shen Bijuan was filled with emotion. At first, I thought that he was the kind of person who was very high and dignified. I didn't expect him to be so kind. I think of my grandparents again, seeing her tearful appearance. Song Qingshu wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. From now on, this is your home. Great Master is your grandfather, and my father is also your father. Shen Bijuan nodded. Her worry quickly turned into joy. After the two of them strolled for a while, Shen Bijuan suddenly said, Show me the room you used to live in. Okay. Song Qingshu nodded. In fact, he had not been here since his transmigration. However, he had inherited the memories of his body, so he naturally knew where it was. Soon, they found his old residence. He found that the windows were bright and clean, and the bedding was neatly folded. There was no spider silk or dust at all. Thinking about how it was so clean, even though he had not been back for a few years, it was obvious that Song Yuanxiao often cleaned it. His heart warmed, and he felt more and more like he belonged to this world. On the other side, in the wing that Mount Wudong prepared for guests, the 2 strange young Taoist priests returned to their room and closed the door. Did you find Song, his whereabouts? The young one asked. The older one snorted. After he left, he took that beautiful girl everywhere to play. Now that he has returned to his room, I don't know what the 2 of them are doing inside. They are really shameless. The young one frowned slightly and quickly changed the topic. With him here this time, I'm afraid we won't be able to complete our mission. The older one shook his head. That may not be true. We have a thorough plan. In that situation, no matter how high his martial arts are, it will be useless. But what if we accidentally hurt him? The young Taoist priest couldn't help but ask. The older Taoist priest was stunned. He said with some uncertainty, his martial arts are so high, he shouldn't be hurt. The young Taoist priest looked at him strangely. Just now, you said that martial arts are useless in that situation. Chapter 1930. The next morning, Song Qingshu woke up early to secretly supervise the preparations for the ceremony with Song Yuanxiao and the others. Zhang Sanfeng had the body of a half-immortal, and he had been warned yesterday, so no one would be able to hurt him. As for Song Yuanxiao and the others, although their martial arts were not weak, they were no match for a grandmaster. Therefore, he was watching over them just in case. However, everything went smoothly, and nothing unexpected happened. This made Song Qingshu think that he was worrying too much. Just before the ceremony began, a little Taoist boy suddenly came to find him with an unknown letter in his hand. For me, Song Qingshu was puzzled. He could not think of anyone who would send him a letter. He had many intelligence agencies under his command. Sang Fei Hong's 5 Lakes sect, Hitieshou's brothel, Jiu's Golden Snake Camp, Rening Ying's Qi Mansion, the Qin Kingdom's Sticky Rod Bureau, the Jin Kingdom's Washing Clothes Bureau, Liao's Secret Intelligence Bureau, and even the Sichuan Ruan clan. Each of these agencies had their own special channels of information. Yes, the messenger asked me to give it to you, the little Taoist boy replied. Song Qing-shu suddenly had a bad premonition and hurriedly tore open the envelope. He had just felt that there was only the weight of a letter inside, so there was no way to set up any traps. Even if it was smeared with poison, he would not be afraid. He was already immune to poison. Song Yuanxiao and the others noticed his expression change and came over. What happened? Song Qingshu's face was ashen as he handed the letter to them. On it was written, "Your woman is in our hands. Quickly bring 10,000 taels of gold to the Xingwang temple in town to redeem her." Song Yuanxiao and the others were shocked. Did something happen to Bijuan? I'll go take a look. Song Qingshu's figure flashed, and he used his lightness skill to go to his room. At the same time, he was very annoyed. He only wanted to protect the Wu-Tang clan and did not take care of the people around him. It seemed that Shun Bijuan had most likely fallen into their hands. As expected, the room was empty. The dressing table was a little messy. It was obvious that Shun Bijuan had been forcibly taken away while she was putting on her makeup. How is it? Song Yuanxiao and the rest hurriedly rushed over. Even Zhang Sanfeng had rushed over upon hearing the news. Song Qingshu said, "It seems that Bijuan is already in their hands." Song Yuanxiao angrily said, "Who dares to commit murder on Mount Wudong?" Zhang Songshi was also a bit puzzled. Miss Shun is a daughter of a noble family and usually doesn't step out of the house. I don't think she has any enemies, so why would someone want to find her? Song Qingshu said in a deep voice, "Presumably, someone thinks that I am a hindrance here and wants to use this opportunity to transfer me away from Mount Wudong." Zhang Sanfeng was horrified. Could it be that it is really as Qing Shu said, that there are people who want to target our Wu Dang sect today? Song Qing Shu hatefully said, "Although I know he is luring the tiger away from the mountain, I have no choice but to save him. Tai Shifu, Shu, I'll go down a mountain for a while. Be careful." Yu Yinzhou said solemnly, "We will accompany you." Song Qing Shu hurriedly refused. "How can I do that? Second Shu, you're about to take over as the leader of Wu Dang sect. How can you let my personal affairs ruin your official business?" Seeing that he still wanted to persuade him, Song Qingshu said, "Don't worry, with my martial arts, it is more than enough to save people. Plus, with my lightness skill, it is more convenient for me to move alone." Zhang Sanfeng nodded. "That's right. With Qingshu's martial arts, I don't think anyone would be able to make things difficult for him at that time." Hearing their master say this, Yu Yinzhou and the others couldn't persuade him anymore, so they could only remind him to be careful. Song Qingshu also said to Zhang Sanfeng, "Tai Shifu, the enemy is obviously luring the tiger away from the mountain. In a moment, there will be a big change on Mount Wudong. You must remember to be careful." Zhang Sanfeng nodded. "You don't have to worry. Although our Wu Dang sect is not a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, we won't let anyone get away with it so easily." Song Qingshu thought about it and agreed, so he didn't say anything more. He immediately used his lightness skill and rushed down the mountain. Looking at his blurred back, Ian Lighting couldn't help but sigh. Qingshu's martial arts are really unfathomable. The others all nodded in agreement. Song Yuanxiao couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, but then he remembered that his daughter-in-law's life was still uncertain, so his heart became heavy again. Meanwhile, as Song Qingshu rushed down the mountain, it could be said that he used his lightness skill to the extreme. Most of the Wu Dang disciples could only feel a breeze on their faces, and by the time they turned around, he had already disappeared without a trace. They didn't even notice that someone had passed by them. Along the way, there are Wu Dang disciples guarding the mountain, so how could it be easy for an outsider to kidnap Bijuan? I think it's most likely someone who was already on a mountain, but I don't know which of the 5 temples they are from. Song Qingshu's thoughts were like electricity, but his heart was cold. In Jianghu, it was very rare to get one's wife and child involved, because everyone knew that once they opened the door, their wife and child would not be able to escape from the hands of the other party. Now that the other party had openly attacked Shin Bijuan, once he found out who the mastermind was, he would definitely make that person regret ever being born. After running for a long time, he finally arrived at the town's city god temple. The temple had been abandoned for a long time, and after searching for half a day, he couldn't find anyone. Song Qingshu's anger was growing, but he also understood that since the other party was luring him away, how could they let him save Shen Bijuan so easily? Now that he was like a headless fly, it would be too late for him to return to Wudang Mountain. Do you think that I can't find a needle in a haystack? Song Qingshu's Zhun Qi sank into his dantian, and then spread it to his limbs and bones. Finally, it circulated in a unique rhythm to his chest. Bijuan, where are you? Bijuan, where are you? Bijuan, where are you? In the next instant, everyone within a radius of several dozen li raised their heads and heard the strange call in the air. All of them were confused, and many people couldn't help but rub their ears, thinking that they were hallucinating. On Wudang Mountain, the ceremony had already begun. At this moment, Zhang Sanfeng was about to put the purple crown on Yu Lianzhou's head, but suddenly, Song Qingshu's voice was heard in the air. The entire Purple Cloud Palace was in an uproar. Originally, everyone present was a great cultivator, and their state of mind was already extremely strong, so they would not have lost their composure like this. But when they heard the voice from 1,000 miles away, they could not remain calm. What kind of martial arts is this? How can his voice travel so far? That sounds like Song Qingshu's voice. I've heard that the Golden Snake King's martial arts are unparalleled. Now that I've seen him, he is indeed extraordinary. Is this Bijuan he is talking about? At this moment, the four heroes of Wudang looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The new generation really surpasses the old one. We have been cultivating for dozens of years, but we are still far inferior to Song Qingshu. In the future, how can we act like elders in front of him? Zhang Sanfeng was experienced and knowledgeable. He had long heard that the Xiao Yao sect had a soul-searching technique that could search for the whereabouts of the enemy within 100 miles. In the past, he had thought that it was just a rumor, but he did not expect that such a magical martial art existed in the world. Chapter 1931. In the city god temple of Shanghai, Song Qingshu kept releasing sound waves to a radius of dozens of miles. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he rushed to somewhere in the west of the town. What he used was, of course, the soul-searching technique of transmitting sound. Wen Ringying was kidnapped in Lin, and he was at a loss as to where to look for her and the despair of looking for a needle in a haystack. It was still fresh in his memory. Fortunately, he was lucky enough to rescue Ren Ying, but he couldn't hope to be so lucky every time. At that time, he reflected on how to deal with such a situation in the future. After thinking for a while, he thought of the method that Li Qiushui used to search for Tianshan Tonglao in the original work, the soul-searching technique of transmitting sound. This matter had always been on his mind. Later, when he came to Xixia and met Li Qiushui, he finally succeeded in learning this magical martial art from him. The reason why this thing was magical was that it relied on internal force and martial arts to act as a radar to a certain extent. Of course, it was not as advanced as a radar, but it was completely comparable to the effect of bats using ultrasonic waves to explore the surrounding environment. There was a big problem with the soul-searching technique of transmitting sound. If the target didn't respond to the summoner's call, it would have no effect at all. In the original work, Tianshan Tonglao heard Li Qiushui's description of how he and Wu Yazi were like glue. She couldn't help but curse, and her position was exposed. When Song Qingshu used the technique, he was most worried about Shen Bijuan. At this time, she couldn't speak. Fortunately, he got a response not long after. It seemed that she was just imprisoned, and she didn't pass out or have her acupoints blocked. After roughly confirming the location from the sound wave feedback, Song Qingshu ran all the way as fast as lightning. Soon, he found Shen Bijuan's whereabouts in a residential house. He saw that she was tied to the bed. Song Qingshu hurried over and untied the rope on her hands. "Bijuan, are you all right?" Seeing the arrival of her lover, Shen Bijuan was pleasantly surprised. But soon, her beautiful face turned pale. "Be careful." Even without her reminder, Song Qingshu had already sensed the abnormality behind him. With a wave of his hand, he swept the long sword that was stabbing at him to the side. Seeing that the opponent was one of the two strange little Taoists from Baiyun Temple, Song Qingshu sneered and said, "There's indeed something wrong with you." The little Taoist priest didn't reply and immediately turned to run. Song Qingshu took a step forward and used so near, yet worlds apart to appear in front of him. At the same time, he reached out his palm and grabbed the Taoist priest's clavicle acupoint. Although his grab looked ordinary, it contained the most fundamental principles of martial arts and blended with the essence of his martial arts. In this world, there were only a handful of people who could dodge this grab. No matter how you looked at it, this little Taoist priest was definitely not one of them. Who knew that the little Taoist would suddenly lean backwards, his waist like a willow that had snapped, causing Song Qingshu's determined grab to miss. Then, the tip of Song Qingshu's toes pushed against the little Taoist's wrist, and using the recoil, he quickly disappeared outside the window on the other side. Song Qingshu was startled and subconsciously wanted to chase after him, but he was worried that he would fall into another trap. He quickly came back and grabbed Shun Bijuan's waist, bringing her with him to chase after the little Taoist priest. He was confident that his Qigong was unparalleled. Even if he was carrying someone, he would still be able to catch up. That person, just now, was very flexible. Along the way, Shun Bijuan couldn't stop praising her. She was able to quickly learn the Shinzu scripture, which was enough to prove how flexible she was. However, the scene just now was something she couldn't do. "I'm afraid that person is a woman disguised as a man." Song Qingshu replied in a low voice. How could there be a man with such good flexibility in this world? At the same time, he also understood why he felt that the other person was a bit effeminate. It was because she was a woman. To be able to make it so that even I couldn't see any flaws, this disguise skill is really not bad. Song Qingshu was secretly amazed and became even more curious about that person's identity. After chasing for a while, his expression became even more strange. It had to be known that with his current Qigong, even if he was carrying a burden, there weren't many people in this world that couldn't catch up to him. However, after running for so long, he still couldn't catch up to the little Taoist priest. Of course, if it was just her Qigong, then it would be fine. Even if Song Qingshu was carrying another person, he was confident that he would be able to catch up to her with his deep inner strength. However, her Qigong was very special. Within a radius of a few feet between the houses and palaces, she could truly be said to be a god. The complicated environment of the small town allowed her to be like a fish in water, and Song Qingshu was almost shaken off several times. Why does this Qigong seem so similar to Dongfang Mushue's movement technique? Song Qingshu immediately rejected this thought. With Dongfang Mushue's personality, she would definitely fight 300 rounds with him. Why would she just run away without a sound? Not to mention changing her appearance. Song Qingshu, put me down and then go after her. Shun Bijuan could also see that she was a burden, so she considerately said to Song Qingshu. Song Qingshu shook his head and refused. "It was my carelessness that put you in danger before. Why would I take the risk again now?" Hearing his words, Shun Bijuan felt sweet in her heart, but she was still worried for her lover. "But, do you really think that I don't have a way?" Song Qingshu smiled and pointed at a certain place in front of the little Taoist priest. A burst of sword chi shot out. No matter how fast her Qigong was, it couldn't be faster than sword chi. The little Taoist priest keenly sensed the danger and immediately changed direction, running in the other direction. After seeing her Qigong, Song Qingshu naturally knew that it would be very difficult to hit her with his sword chi. However, even if he couldn't hit her, it would still affect her escape speed to a certain extent. Just like that, Song Qingshu shot the sword chi in her direction in advance. The space for the little Taoist to move and dodge became smaller and smaller. In the end, she simply stopped and turned her head to look at Song Qingshu quietly. "What? You're not running anymore." Song Qingshu smiled and stopped. The little Taoist priest's gaze landed on his hand that was tightly holding Shun Bijuan. Suddenly, He unsheathed his sword and attacked. You want to compete with me in swordsmanship? Song Qingshu chuckled and casually flicked his finger. Amidst the dazzling sword shadows, he flicked the real sword. The little Taoist's body trembled, but he quickly steadied himself. Song Qingshu was worried that the situation on Wudong Mountain had changed. He didn't want to waste too much time here. He took advantage of this opening to attack. He had to restrain her as soon as possible. Who knew that a sword would suddenly appear in the opponent's left hand? The tip of the sword trembled slightly, and in a flash, it covered his left wrist, left leg, and right leg. The speed of the sword was really rare in this world, but for some reason, it seemed that each sword was holding back 30% of his strength. Song Qingshu's figure flashed and avoided the incomparably fast four swords. Instead of being shocked, he was happy. Pure heart of jade maiden swordsmanship. Longer, is that you? The little Taoist priest was about to raise his sword again, but when he heard the way he was addressed, he stopped and couldn't help but spit out, "Who's your longer?" Song Qingshu laughed. If it weren't for you, who in this world would be able to use the pure heart of jade maiden swordsmanship? Other than the ancient tomb's sex Qinggong, who in this world would be able to advance and retreat like a god? He had read the original works in his past life. Although he was very familiar with the martial arts of all the sects in this world, he often only knew the names. When he saw them, he might not be able to match them. In terms of martial arts knowledge, he was far from being as knowledgeable as Zhang Sanfo. In fact, he might not even be as knowledgeable as Wang Yuyan. That was why he didn't recognize it. Chapter 1932. Since she had already been recognized, Xiao Long Nu didn't need to deny it anymore. She tore off her disguise and revealed her beautiful face. Shen Bijuan was dumbfounded. She had always been proud of her beauty, but now that she realized that all of Song Qingshu's women were more beautiful than the last, she felt more and more pressure. Didn't you teach me the art of eternal youth in the bone-changing and bone-forging section of the 9 manual? I've been practicing it for a while and feel that my inner energy has improved. Xiao Long Nu's voice was calm, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. Song Qingshu finally remembered. No wonder her Qinggong was so good. The ancient tomb, sex Qinggong, was already unparalleled in the martial arts world. In the original novel, Xiao Long Nu was able to compete with Iron Palm, floating on water, in terms of Qinggong. It was just that her inner energy was slightly weaker, so she was slightly weaker when it came to long-distance running. Now that her inner energy had improved, her Qinggong no longer had any weaknesses. Coupled with her elusive pure heart of jade women's sword technique, even if she fought against the 5 uniques, the outcome of the battle would still be unknown. She would not be able to defeat Jinluan Fuwang and the 3 Mongolian heroes in the original work. But in the end, they would be targeted because their chi was inferior. Right? Who was that Taoist with you? Song Qingshu remembered how intimate she was with the other Taoist. Although he knew that it was most likely someone else in disguise, he still felt a little jealous. You'll know later. Xiao Long Nu answered ambiguously. Song Qingshu frowned and continued to ask, "Then why did you capture her? Don't tell me you're jealous?" Xiao Long Nu blushed. "Of course not. I just wanted to lure you away." Song Qingshu's heart sank. "You're from the Mansion of Spirits?" Xiao Long Nu was also a little surprised. "You know about the Mansion of Spirits?" Song Qingshu no longer had any doubts. "What are you planning? Are you planning to harm the Wu-Tang clan?" Xiao Long Nu's red lips parted slightly, but she didn't say anything in the end. No matter what the other party asked, she always responded with silence. "Then I'll go take a look myself." Song Qingshu was worried that something might happen to the Wudong sect, but he had only taken 2 steps when Xiao Long Nu blocked his way again. "You want to stop me?" Song Qingshu was a little annoyed. Xiao Long Nu hesitated for a moment and said, "We didn't expect you to find Miss Shin so quickly. If you go back now, it will ruin the original plan. But don't worry, your father will be fine." Meanwhile, on the other side of Mount Wudong's purple cloud palace, the flame of the oil lamp hanging in midair suddenly became smaller. In the next moment, it suddenly extinguished, leaving only a little remnant spark. The entire room suddenly became dark, and before anyone could react, the surrounding doors and windows suddenly slid down one by one. As a result, the entire hall was instantly plunged into incomparable darkness. Zhang Sanfeng's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that what Qing Shu said was true. Someone really wanted to cause trouble here. Sensing that the hall had suddenly become chaotic, Zhang Sanfeng shouted, "Everyone, don't panic. Everyone, do your job. Stay where you are and don't move." Zhang Sanfeng's 100 years of experience was very rich. He knew that when people were in darkness, they would be anxious, and it was easy for them to become crazy and chaotic. When everyone was in danger, there would definitely be people who would brandish their weapons and fists in order to protect themselves. Some of the more experienced and prudent people, or those with extremely high willpower, could have calmed down and adapted to the situation. However, there were so many people in the hall who could not dodge in the darkness. Other than brandishing their weapons to protect themselves, there was no other way. If this continued, it would only be a fight. Zhang Sanfeng's skills were divine. This shout of his used a Taoist method. In addition to his extremely high prestige, the chaotic hall instantly quieted down. He had just breathed a sigh of relief when he suddenly heard the sound of something piercing through the air. His face couldn't help but change. This was because he could tell that this was the sound of a hidden weapon piercing through the air. Hidden weapons. Immediately after, screams could be heard one after another. It was obvious that many people had already been injured by the hidden weapons. Zhang Sanfeng was both shocked and angry. With his skills, these flying hidden weapons naturally could not hurt him. However, the young disciples in the hall were afraid that they would be in danger. If the other party came openly, with his martial arts skills and the manpower of the Wudang sect, he would not be afraid of anyone. However, this kind of cunning plot, one after another, really gave him a feeling that even if he had the strength, he would not be able to use it. Everyone retreat to the wall or the side of the pillar. Guard the door in front of you. As Zhang Sanfeng arranged, he used his pure yang internal energy to shoot towards the position of the oil lamp in his memory. His 100-year virgin internal energy was extremely powerful. The extreme yang energy within it was probably even more blazing than the Shaolin wood burning sword technique. When it hit the oil lamp, it was enough to reignite the wick. Unfortunately, the oil lamp only exploded with a little spark and did not ignite. Zhang Sanfeng couldn't help but be startled. Yu Yanzhou, who was beside him, hurriedly said, "It's most likely that the thieves secretly poured out the oil inside." Zhang Sanfeng knew that this was most likely the case. Perhaps they had carried out meticulous calculations in advance to be able to extinguish so many lamps at the same time. Since there was no way to continue to light the lamps, then as long as he broke through the door and let the light from the outside shine in. Although it was not as bright as the oil lamp, it was enough to clearly see the surrounding situation. With a thought, his whole body was already near the door. Just as he was about to use his strength to shake open the door, his expression suddenly changed. This was because he had already sensed that in the darkness, several swords were attacking his body. Although his martial arts were unfathomable, his eyes could not see anyone. Most of the martial arts he had learned was almost useless. Moreover, he did not know how many enemies there were in all directions. Even if he could control a few of them, he would inevitably be seriously injured by the others. With no other choice, he could only fly back to his original position and avoid the enemy's sword formation. Why are these people able to see in the darkness? Zhang Sanfeng was puzzled. Just now, those people's sword techniques were ruthless and cautious. They had sealed all of his major acupuncture points. They were definitely not randomly stabbing him. If it were not for the fact that his martial arts had reached the point where he could use them as he pleased, he would have been injured by their hands. Yes, most of these swordsmen are blind. They have long been accustomed to the dark environment. Naturally, their martial arts are not affected in the slightest. Zhang Sanfeng was experienced and knowledgeable, so he immediately understood the crux of the matter. At this time, the sound of a sharp sword piercing into a human body could be heard from the main hall. It was followed by a series of blood-curdling screams. Chapter 1933. As expected, after hearing his voice, several people surrounded him. Zhang Sanfeng frowned. Actually, with his level of cultivation, he could see things even in the dark. However, there were still some stars or moonlight in the dark. At this moment, there was no light at all in the hall. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't go against the basic rules of this world. Since he couldn't see anything, he simply closed his eyes and silently sensed the chi of everyone around him. The three swords stabbed towards him like poisonous snakes, but he didn't seem to move at all. His hands brushed around his body as if he was weak and powerless, but they accurately hit the three swords. If there was an infrared imaging device, it would definitely be seen that Zhang Sanfeng's hands and feet were as gentle as a breeze. However, to the three assassins, it was as if they were being crushed by a mountain. They screamed and died. The other assassins were shocked. Is there a fire in the room? At this moment, another voice rang. No, it's still dark. This voice deliberately changed its voice, but Zhang Sanfeng could still hear it. Stupid T, it really is you. Stupid T scoffed and didn't speak anymore. Zhang Sanfeng originally planned to follow the voice and subdue him, but he suddenly realized the most important thing now is to save the others in the hall. As for Stupid T, we can deal with him later. After the initial shock, he had already calmed down. He flicked his sleeves and threw a chair that he remembered from his memory towards the nearest window. He already understood that although the blind swordsmen were good at swordsmanship, their internal energy was still weak. This chair that contained his own chi would not be able to block it no matter how good their swordsmanship was. As long as the wooden planks on the window were broken, the light would pass through and the situation in the hall would be reversed. At the same time, he felt strange. He didn't know when these people installed the mechanism in the hall. Luckily, the security of the Hall of Purple Cloud was quite tight. Those thieves didn't have much time to install the metal planks. If the metal planks sealed off the entire hall, they would really be helpless. Suddenly, his face changed. This was because he realized that the chair that contained the chi seemed to have hit a spider web. Then, it was cut into pieces by the spider silk. Naturally, it didn't have any energy left to break the window. This is sword chi. Zhang Sanfeng was shocked and immediately kicked out a few more stools. Without exception, all of them were cut into small cubes. That's not right. Someone must have used sharp iron wires or natural silk to weave something similar to a spider web in the surroundings. If someone bumped into it without knowing the reason, they would have been decapitated. Thinking of this, he quickly reminded the people of the Wudong sect not to rush out recklessly. However, the blood-curdling screams of various disciples immediately rang out from all directions. Among them were even the Shangqing Monastery's Taoist Tiansu and the Jaipur Monastery's Taoist Majun. Zhang Sanfeng was greatly alarmed. Listening to their screams, it seemed that they had met with misfortune. At the same time, he was somewhat puzzled. Those blind swordsmen's swordsmanship had their limits. After all, the Taoist Tiansu and the Taoist Majun were grandmasters of the sect. If they were to rely on the wall to defend themselves, they shouldn't have met with danger so quickly. Circulating his internal energy to listen carefully, he could hear a faint sound of something piercing through the air coming from the darkness. It sounded like someone was crawling on the walls of the main hall like an ape, as if it was walking on flat ground, unceasingly attacking the Wudong disciples. This person is also blind. Zhang Sanfeng immediately denied this conjecture. Even a blind person couldn't be so precise and powerful. The other person gave off the feeling that he could see everything. However, at this moment, he didn't have the time to think about it. His body moved to intercept that mysterious person, but a long sword silently stabbed into his back. Fortunately, his internal energy was profound. Normally, his chi would circulate in all directions. Just as the other person's sword stabbed into his body, it was deflected by his internal energy. That person was startled. Missing his attack, he hurriedly retreated, planning to escape 1,000 miles away. What kind of person was Zhang Sanfeng? How could he let him come and go as he pleased? With a stretch of his arm, Zhang Sanfeng grabbed the body of the sword. Using the tail of the sparrow from the Tai Chi fist, he conveniently pulled that person into his arms. That person was greatly shocked. He hurriedly abandoned his sword and used his fists and palms to protect the front of his body, blocking Zhang Sanfeng's slap. Zhang Sanfeng couldn't help but let out a sound of surprise. It must be known that there were only a handful of experts who could take one move from him. Even experts like the Xianming elders could be subdued by him in one move. Now, although he was affected by the darkness, his opponent was still able to defend in time. If placed in the Jianghu, he would definitely be a top expert. However, he was only slightly surprised for a moment. He reached out and grabbed his opponent's wrist. Taking advantage of the situation, he slammed his shoulder into the other person's chest. That person spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. Zhang Sanfeng didn't chase after him. There was no one in this world who could survive after taking a full blow from him. No one. Tai Chi fist, it really lives up to its reputation. An intermittent voice came from the darkness. Immediately after, there was no more breath. Stupid T. Those assassins clearly heard the voice of their companion. They were somewhat bewildered. Don't touch Zhang Sanfeng. Finish off the others first. Another person shouted. Zhang Sanfeng frowned. This couldn't go on like this. Those blind assassins, that expert in the darkness who was like a monkey or a spider, would soon finish off everyone else. At that time, this branch of Wu Dang will be broken. Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. Why did he have to be so obsessed with lighting the oil lamps? Weren't there so many curtains in this room? So he tore off the dry curtains and once again used his pure yang inner energy to grind them. Soon, the curtains gradually began to burn. It must be known that the Shaolin burning saber technique used true qi as a saber. By quickly chopping a piece of dry wood 81 times, the edge of the saber would not damage the wood in the slightest. The heat emitted from the saber could actually ignite the wood to start fire. Zhang Sanfeng originally cultivated the pure yang inner energy. At the same time, he also cultivated the 100-year virgin technique. Using his inner energy to ignite the curtains was naturally not a problem. As the fire burned, the entire hall gradually recovered its brightness. Zhang Sanfeng finally saw the situation in the hall clearly. He saw many Wu Dang disciples lying on the ground. It was obvious that they had already lost their lives. Among them were Ma Jun and Taoist Tian Su had screamed earlier. As for Yu Yinzhou and the others, although their lives were not in danger, they were all injured. Zhang Sanfeng was really about to call them to set up a formation to fight against the enemy when he suddenly noticed that their expressions were strange. It turned out that a few of them had already been restrained by the people beside them. It seemed that they did not want to distract him, so they did not make a sound. The other disciples of the younger generation had also lost their ability to fight. As for the disciples of the other four sects, they were even more heavily injured. Taoist Huang Mu, Zhang Sanfeng finally understood who the mysterious expert who flew in the darkness was. Taoist Huang Mu glanced at Stupid T, who was lying on the ground not far away with his eyes wide open. A hint of fear flashed in his eyes. Stupid T prided himself on his swordsmanship, but Taoist Zhang took away his sword in one move and killed him in one move. No wonder he could not die in peace. Zhang Sanfeng said in a deep voice, "What you used just now was not the martial arts of Xiandu sect. Who are you?" Taoist Huang Mu laughed. "Of course I am Taoist Huang Mu. It's just that after 3 days of separation, people will have to look at me in a different light. I had some other adventures." Adventures? Zhang Sanfeng frowned slightly. He was a little confused. Chapter 1934. Spirit Jade Technique. Zhang Sanfeng pondered for a moment. He did not have any impression of this technique in his memory, so this technique should have been left behind 100 years ago. Does this technique allow people to see in the dark? This was also what he was most puzzled about. If he could not see in the dark, how could he subdue the people of Wu Dang in such a short time? Yellowwood Taoist shook his head. It cannot see in the dark, but it can spread out inner force like silk and weave it into a net within a certain range. It can determine the target's position by touch. Like a spider, no wonder. Zhang Sanfeng suddenly understood. So the opponent could move in the dark as if it was daytime. There is such a magical martial art in the world. As soon as his voice fell, he had already arrived at the side of Yellowwood Taoist and grabbed his clavicle point. As long as he grabbed it, no matter how magical the opponent's martial art was, he would not be able to resist. Suddenly, his expression changed and his movements seemed to freeze for a moment. Yellowwood Taoist took this opportunity to attack with his long sword, which bloomed with a dazzling light. Zhang Sanfeng took a few steps back, dissolving his attack. However, he did not have the slightest bit of joy. You poison me? Sorrowful wind softening, colorless and tasteless. It really lives up to its reputation. Yellowwood Taoist looked at a young Taoist wearing Baiyun Taoist clothes and could not help but praise. He did not hide his martial art background just now because he wanted to delay the poison. After all, Zhang Sanfeng was too famous, and they were worried that the poison would not take effect in a short time. The young Taoist also sighed. Master Zhang is really worthy of being a half-immortal. It took you so long to be affected. Although his voice was a little cold, it had a bit of crispness. It was obviously a woman. Zhang Sanfeng sighed. I did not expect that I would be defeated by the hands of a woman twice. I wonder if you are the Shishia's old princess or princess. The 2 times he was defeated by the hands of a woman, the other time was naturally referring to Zhao Min's scheme to seriously injure him. The young Taoist shook his head. Neither. Before she could finish her words, Zhang Sanfeng had already appeared by her side. His pair of hands blocked off all directions of escape. In his heart, he understood that since the poison was cast by her, then she must have the corresponding antidote on her body. As for the matter of the strong bullying the weak, it was a matter of life and death for the Wudong sect. He was not a stubborn old pedant, so naturally he did not care about such an empty reputation. Who would have guessed that she would use the Book of Changes and the 8 trigrams to evade the attack with an extremely mysterious footwork? Zhang Sanfeng couldn't help but be startled. The carefree sect treading waves, subtle steps? Although the carefree sect was mysterious, how could they hide from his 100 years of experience? But the little Taoist didn't dare to be distracted in the slightest because the other party's hand was like a heavenly punishment descending from the clouds. No matter how she dodged, it followed her like a shadow. If she was slightly careless, she would be restrained by the other party. The little Taoist priest was overwhelmed with shock in her heart. It must be known that she was also a grandmaster of a sect. Her reputation also caused many people to tremble with fear upon hearing her name. But when faced with a poisoned Zhang Sanfeng, a feeling of powerlessness actually arose in her heart. Fortunately, Taoist Huang Mu, who was not too far away, saw that something was amiss. Grabbing 2 long swords, he charged towards Zhang Sanfeng. Dual rights swordsmanship? No, it seems to be a mixture of the reverse dual rights swordsmanship, one righteous and one evil. I didn't think that you would actually be able to come up with a solution and research such an exquisite swordsmanship. The dual right swordsmanship was originally derived from the martial arts of the Wudong sect, so Zhang Sanfeng was naturally able to see through it with a single glance. However, the swordsmanship that the other party was displaying was not an ordinary dual right swordsmanship. In many areas, it was even the exact opposite. It would be more appropriate to call it the positive and negative dual right swordsmanship. Taoist Huang Mu smiled proudly. Ever since I learned the Spirit Jade technique, my inner energy is high, and my entire outlook is naturally very different. Many things that I couldn't understand in the past have suddenly become clear. Thinking back to the time when I was conceited that the dual right swordsmanship was unbreakable by anyone, and when Golden Snake Prince pointed out the flaws in it, I was still somewhat unconvinced. Afterwards, when I concentrated on my cultivation in the Poisonous Dragon Cave, Only then did I realize what a frog at the bottom of a well I was. After spending 10 years of effort, I finally researched and perfected this set of positive and negative dual right swordsmanship. Not only have I perfected the flaws of the previous swordsmanship, but my offensive power has also risen to a new level. Zhang Sanfeng shook his head and said, "Swordsmanship is dead, but people are alive. In this world, there is no swordsmanship that is flawless." The swordsmanship in front of him was indeed breathtaking, but if he was not poisoned, it would not be difficult to break it. However, now that his inner energy was gradually fading away, his entire body's limbs were many times heavier than usual. If he wanted to break it again, it would not be so easy anymore. Taoist Huang Mu was startled. It was obvious that the other party's words had vaguely touched upon a certain threshold. "In that case, please enlighten me, Master Zhang." After saying that, he brandished his swordsmanship more and more exquisitely, so much so that he even exerted 120% of his strength. On the side, the Wudong warriors saw that their master had changed from attack to defense, and his movements were much more obscure than usual. One after another, they angrily rebuked, "Taoist Huang Mu, do you still want to be so shameless? My master has been poisoned, and you are taking advantage of him while he is in such a pretentious state." At this moment, the female Taoist priest who was disguised as a man saw that although Taoist Huang Mu's attacks were fast and fierce, they were still being countered by Zhang Sanfeng one by one. She could not help but be shocked. Under the effects of the grieving wind softener, Zhang Sanfeng's inner energy must be almost depleted, yet he is still able to block Taoist Huang Mu's attacks. He is indeed worthy of being recognized as the world's #1 for the past few decades. She was worried that the situation would change if she delayed any longer, but she just happened to hear the voices of the Wudong warriors. Her mind turned, and she immediately came up with a plan. She used her wave-like, subtle steps to come to the side of the few people, stretched out her long sword, and placed it on the neck of one of them. Suddenly, she noticed that the other person was Song Yuanxiao. She bit her lip and finally moved her sword to the side, placing it on Yu Lianzhou's neck. "Master Zhang, if you continue to resist stubbornly, I'm afraid that this beloved disciple of yours, the next leader of Wudong, will have to meet the great Emperor Zhenwu." Seeing this, Zhang Sanfeng was startled, and his hands immediately slowed down. His Taoist robe was immediately cut open by the other party's sharp sword. Seeing this scene, Yu Lianzhou almost burst into tears. "Master, don't worry about me, let's go." The little Taoist sneered, "Master Zhang, these past few years, a few of the 7 heroes of Wudong have already died. I'm sure that you, an old man, are not willing to experience the pain of sending off your son again. Don't worry, as long as you stop resisting, we will not harm a single hair on your body. We will only invite you to a certain place as a guest for a period of time." Zhang Sanfeng faintly sighed. "I have already lost Suishan and the Sound Valley. I don't want to experience that kind of feeling again." With that, he dropped his hands. Song Yuanxiao, Yu Lianzhou, and the others covered their eyes with tears. They wanted nothing more than to die immediately so that they would not be a burden to their master. Seeing that Zhang Sanfeng had given up resisting, Taoist Yellow would quickly seal the acupoints on his body. Then, with a sinister smile, he thrust his sword towards Zhang Sanfeng's chest. "Master!" Seeing this, the people of Wudong were shocked. However, their acupoints had already been sealed, so there was no way they could go forward to rescue him. In the nick of time, the little Taoist threw the sword in his hand over, which collided with Taoist Yellowwood's sword. However, Taoist Yellowwood's internal energy was profound, so this collision only caused his sword to deviate slightly, but it still managed to pierce through. Chapter 1935. Zhang Sanfeng looked at her in surprise. He didn't understand how she had used her disciple to threaten him just a moment ago. In the next moment, she seemed to have changed sides. "I won't die yet." The little Taoist took a closer look and discovered that his wound was a bit away from his heart. Furthermore, it shouldn't have injured his lungs. Secretly rejoicing, he quickly sealed the acupuncture points near his wound and took some golden sore medicine to apply on his wound. Taoist Huang Mu snorted. Widow Hua, what do you mean by this? The people of Wudong didn't understand. What the hell was Widow Hua? At this moment, the little Taoist stood up and said in an unfriendly tone, Wandering soul, I still want to ask you what you mean. The original plan was to just restrain them. Why did you kill them? Song Yuan Xiao, who was standing at the side, felt a chill in his heart. He remembered that Song Qingshu had mentioned that Wandering Soul had tried to assassinate someone in Sichuan. He didn't expect it to be Taoist Huang Mu. Thinking about this cross-dressing little Taoist's nickname, it seemed like the Mansion of Spirits really did exist. Taoist Huang Mu replied, Zhang Sanfeng's martial arts are too high. He killed Stupid T in one move. He was even able to fight me to a draw after being hit by the sorrowful wind softener. If we wait for him to recover, who among us can restrain him? Looking at Stupid T, who had died with his eyes open, Taoist Huang Mu felt a lingering fear. He had always admired Stupid T's martial arts. He had also learned the martial arts of the Isle of Heroes over the years. He could be said to be a top expert in the pugilistic world. Who would have thought that such a person could not even last one move against Zhang Sanfeng? Widow Hua frowned. Zhang Sanfeng's reputation is too high. If he dies, the impact will be too great. Taoist Huang Mu snorted. What impact? No matter how famous he is just a pugilistic world person. If he dies, then so be it. Widow Hua sneered. Just a pugilistic world person? Who gave Zhenren Zhang all these titles? There are so many emperors in the Song dynasty. Which one of them didn't give him titles? Even the destroyed Ming dynasty and the Jin kingdom in the north have all given titles to Zhenren Zhang. In your words, he is just a pugilistic world person? Priest Huang Mu angrily said, You are talking nonsense. Could it be that you have some other plan? Oh, I remember now. You've been living alone for a long time, but you're born charming and graceful. That Song Qingshu is a famous playboy in Jianghu who's best at deceiving women. Don't tell me you've fallen in love with him, and that's why you love me and my dog? Bastard. Widow Hua's expression turned cold, and a hint of anger flashed in her eyes. She charged towards Taoist Huang Mu. Between the two of them, one's swordsmanship was exquisite and his internal energy was strange, while the other's movements were marvelous and his moves were graceful. When Song Yuan Xiao and the others saw that an unknown little Taoist from White Cloud Monastery had such profound martial arts, they couldn't help but feel ashamed. Zhang Sanfeng, on the other hand, had exceptional foresight. With just a few glances, he was able to recognize the martial arts of that Widow Hua. Rippling subtle steps, white rainbow palm force. So, it's the holy mother of the White Lotus Society. At this moment, the blind assassin who was guarding the side, as well as some people from Baiyu Monastery, couldn't help but advise when they saw the two big shots fighting. Wandering Soul, Widow Hua, what are you doing? Don't ruin old Saber Honcho's plans. Taoist Huang Mu hurriedly said, Hurry up and kill Zhang Sanfeng. Otherwise, when Song Qingshu returns, everything will be for naught. The other assassins looked at each other and felt that what Taoist Huang Mu said made sense. They all pounced towards Zhang Sanfeng. Widow Hua was shocked. In a flash, she had already surrounded Zhang Sanfeng to protect him. After forcing back a few assassins, she said angrily, Old Saber Honcho's order is to capture Zhang Sanfeng and threaten the Wudong heroes to cooperate. If we kill him, we'll ruin our plans. Taoist Huang Mu also roared, but old Saber Honcho didn't expect Song Qingshu to come. If we continue with our original plan and wait for him to return, who here can stop him? When he rescues Zhang Sanfeng, we'll really ruin Boss's plans. Everyone, listen up. Widow Hua is selfish. There's no need to listen to him. It's more important to kill Zhang Sanfeng first. Hearing that his words were reasonable, the assassins were more or less shaken. However, they were afraid of Zhang Sanfeng's prestige and hesitated for a moment. However, when the disciples of Baiyu Monastery saw that their master had died at Zhang Sanfeng's hands, they were all eager for revenge. They took the lead and stabbed their swords towards Zhang Sanfeng. Widow Hua's expression changed. With a wave of her sleeve, she swept the swords of the disciples of Baiyun Monastery to the side. Zhang Sanfeng was full of praise. What a good move, flowing cloud, flying sleeve. Taoist Huang Mu's expression darkened. He directly attacked Widow Hua. Widow Hua has betrayed the villa. Everyone attacked together. There's no need to show mercy to her. Widow Hua secretly groaned. With her martial arts, she was actually not afraid of Taoist Huang Mu. However, now that she was facing so many assassins at the same time and had to take care of the Wudong people, she was quickly surrounded by danger. She really brought this upon herself. She thought about how she had sent people to lure Song Qingshu away. Now, she was going to suffer the consequences of her actions. Taoist Huang Mu also understood this. He decided not to directly attack Widow Hua. Instead, he attacked Zhang Sanfeng and the Wudong people. Widow Hua was instantly unable to attend to one thing and lose sight of the other. How shameless can you be? How can you use such a shameless method? Widow Hua's voice seemed to be filled with ice. Taoist Huang Mu did not think much of it. This is not a martial arts competition. Who is talking about rules with you? Widow Hua was extremely angry, but she could not refute him. The two of them exchanged dozens of blows. In the end, in order to save the people of Wudong, Taoist Huang Mu slapped her on the shoulder. She slammed heavily into a pillar and spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing how she could no longer fight back, Taoist Huang Mu finally stopped worrying. As he ordered his subordinates to put out the fire in the hall, he also ordered people to open the doors and windows. If they did not put out the fire, then so be it if the entire hall burned down, but all of them would be buried in the sea of fire. Widow Hua, why must you do this? Taoist Huang Mu arrived before Widow Hua and ripped off her mask, revealing a beautiful but rather pale face. He chuckled and said, "When I first saw you earlier, I was captivated by your bright charm. It's a pity that you're a prickly one, and your martial arts are extraordinary as well, so it was difficult for me to take action. I never thought you'd take the initiative and give me this opportunity. I think I, Taoist Huang Mu, have really hit the jackpot today. Not only can I destroy the Wudong sect with a single hand in a single day, but I can also enjoy the pleasures of the world." Ha ha ha. Tui. Widow Hua was obviously the White Lotus Mother, Li Qingluo. Right now, her expression was cold and arrogant. She was not afraid at all. You must be waiting for that cousin of yours to return. Her sword style is indeed rather troublesome, but you can tell with a single glance that she's inexperienced. You don't even have to use martial arts. I'll be able to take her down with just a few tricks. Taoist Huang Mu could not help but lick his lips. Speaking of which, that cousin of yours is ridiculously beautiful. It'll definitely be fun to play with a pair of sisters like that. Chapter 1936. Bah! Taoist Huang Mu was instantly enraged. Cultivation? What Tao? I was imprisoned in the poisonous dragon cave for more than 10 years. When I was tortured, where were the 3 pure ones and Jinwu Great Emperor? Now you call yourselves the Wudong sect, but where were you Wudong people at that time? Did you help us at all? Zhang Song, she said angrily. You like to play around with Jinshi Langjun. It's normal for you to disappear all day. How would we know that something happened to you? Taoist Huang Mu sneered. You didn't know? It's fine if you didn't hear from me for 10 days or half a month. But what about a year? It's been more than 10 years. Well, have you guys ever come looking for me? Sixth hero Lighting said, every sect has their own matters to attend to. During that period of time, our 5th brother was in trouble. Later on, because of Wuji's cold poison, they had to travel all over the world. Their energy was limited, so it's normal that they didn't notice the changes in the other sections. Priest Yellow would laugh out loud, his internal energy shaking the entire hall. I know, our immortal metropolis sect is only a small sect in Jianghu. How could we enter the eyes of high-ranking sects like you? Let alone not knowing. Even if you knew, would you come to save me? Fuwei Escort Agency was destroyed by Qingshang sect. Which righteous sect doesn't know? In the end, whether it was Shaolin or Wudong, did you interfere? Yu Lianzhou said in a deep voice. Although everyone knows that Qing Chang's sect has been plotting for a long time, Yu Songhai used his son's death to seek revenge. It's not appropriate for other sects to interfere. The rest of the people secretly admired him. They all said that second hero Yu was calm and upright. His answer was indeed reasonable, and no mistakes could be found. Bullshit. Taoist Huang Mu became even angrier. It's just an excuse made by you righteous hypocrites. Today, I will completely trample all of you high and mighty people under my feet. Ha 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 ha. He originally wanted to show off and see Zhang Sanfeng's reaction before he died. But when he met his eyes, he saw that his eyes were like a god. For a moment, he didn't dare to look him in the eye. Then he was quite angry at himself for that moment of timidity. But he didn't dare to get too close. He kicked with the tip of his foot. The blade on the ground was infused with internal energy and quickly stabbed towards Zhang Sanfeng. Master, Grandmaster, Immortal Zhang. The group of people began to cry out one after another. But at this time, Li Qingluo, who was originally the only one who still had the strength to fight, was also heavily injured and powerless. She could only watch helplessly as the sword drew closer and closer to Zhang Sanfeng, and finally stabbed into his Taoist robe. Just as it was about to stab into his Taoist robe in one go, a sudden dragon's roar rang out, and the sword instantly shattered into pieces. Priest Huang Mu's countenance changed greatly. He quickly turned his head to look at the main hall's entrance. Qing Shu, Song Yuanxiao, and the rest of the Wudong heroes were extremely excited. A young man walked in through the door, and beside him were two women who looked like fairies descending from the heavens. They added a hint of gentleness to the austere hall. The newcomers were naturally Song Qing Shu, Xiao Long Nu, and Shun Bijuan. Back in the room, Xiao Long Nu had blocked Song Qing Shu's way. No matter how Song Qing Shu tried to persuade her, she didn't budge at all. In the end, he couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. When the time comes, swords have no eyes. How can I guarantee that my father and grandmaster will be safe and sound? Xiao Long Nu shook her head. With her here, Immortal Zhang and Hero Song won't be harmed in any way. You really want to stop me? Song Qing Shu said in a low voice. At this moment, he had too many questions in his heart that he wanted to know the answer to. But Xiao Long Nu had always been a cold person, and in order to keep it a secret, she didn't reveal any useful information, which made him feel more and more irritated. Xiao Long Nu answered, "Although I can't stop you, I can still delay you for a while." That's enough. Song Qing Shu was startled. He knew that time was of the essence, so he didn't want to waste time arguing with her. His body flashed, and he attacked her. A snow-white light instantly bloomed in front of Xiao Long Nu. Her two swords used the pure heart of jade maiden swordsmanship, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Fortunately, it was Song Qing Shu. If it were anyone else, they would have already been injured by his sword. On the side, Shin Bijuan rubbed her eyes. She could only see a white shadow and a green shadow entangled together. She couldn't see the fight at all, and she couldn't even hear the sound of weapons clashing. She was a bit worried about her lover, but she quickly reacted. Not to mention that Brother Song's martial arts were very strong. This woman's expression and words seemed to have a lot of affection for him. Even if there was a chance, she wouldn't hurt Brother Song. While she was lost in thought, Song Qing Shu suddenly jumped out of the fighting ring. He said gloomily, "You know that I won't hurt you, but you only attack and don't defend. Isn't that a bit too shameless?" His opponent's martial arts had improved rapidly, and now she was using this shameless method of fighting. It was difficult for him to subdue her in a short amount of time. Xiao Long Nu's lips curled up in a beautiful arc. "I can't beat you, so I naturally have to think of other ways. Long time no see. You become bad." Song Qing Shu was currently gnashing his teeth. He didn't know who had led her astray. Xiao Long Nu smiled faintly. "To deal with a bad person like you, I naturally have to be a bit bad." Song Qing Shu held his breath. After a long time, he said angrily, "Do you think that I won't be able to do anything?" Just as Xiao Long Nu was about to answer, she suddenly lost sight of him. Startled, She instinctively stabbed her sword at the blind spot behind her. When she turned around, she found that the other party had indeed appeared there, and she had stabbed him with her sword. Ah! Xiaolong Nu let out a soft cry. She didn't expect her opponent to be so easily stabbed. She couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. She hurriedly withdrew her sword, but she suddenly realized that there was something wrong with the feeling of the tip of her sword. She looked at it, and sure enough, it was just an afterimage. It was too late for her to react. She felt a finger poke her waist, and her whole body lost all strength. She fell into his arms. "You cheated." Xiaolong Nu's face was slightly red. It was unknown whether it was from embarrassment or anger. Hugging her soft body, Song Qingshu chuckled. "It's only because you couldn't bear to hurt me that I had the chance to take advantage of you. This is called giving you a taste of your own medicine." Shameless, Xiaolong Nu turned her face to the side. Only then did Song Qingshu stop smiling. I'm worried about the people of the Wu-Tang sect. I want to go back and take a look. I'll let you go. If you try to stop me again, I'll spank your butt." He thought for a long time, but couldn't think of anything to threaten her. He originally wanted to say that he would never treat her as a friend again, but he suddenly felt reluctant to do so. So, he changed it to a nondescript sentence. I'll tell senior sister next time." Xiaolong Nu's heart was beating wildly. She didn't know how to react. Suddenly, she noticed that Shun Bijuan was looking at the two of them strangely. She hurriedly said, "Let go of me. I said I wouldn't stop you." Song Qingshu confirmed. Xiaolong Nu nodded. "Yes." Chapter 1937. Daltblick //W3 C//DXHTML1 0 transition /XHTML1 /DD/itional DD HTML equals //3/1999 /XHTML head meta 8 /title 404 not font TB found /title /headbutable border equals 0 width equals 850 TRT width equals 550 height equals 560 T align equals and quite S3 /TD /TR /table /body. Chapter 1938. Haha, well done, well done. The heavenly empty Taoist let out a few long laughs before finally taking his last breath. "Cousin," Xiaolong Nu cried out and hurried over to hold Li Qingluo. Sensing her weak pulse, she turned to Song Qingshu in a hurry. "Brother Song, please save her." Song Qingshu snorted coldly. "Aren't you asking for this?" Xiaolong Nu explained. "Cousin really didn't know they were going to kill the Wu-Tang sect. She even told me before that it was fortunate that they were only keeping you under house arrest. Otherwise, in the future, she wouldn't be able to face you." The expressions of the people of Wu-Tang immediately became strange. The White Lotus Mother was said to be a solitary person, and it seemed like she had a rather large daughter. Why did it sound like she had an unclear relationship with Song Qingshu? Zhang Sanfeng opened his mouth and said, "Qingshu, don't blame the two of them. If it weren't for her risking her life to protect us just now, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to wait until you arrived." "Yeah." Yu Yinzhou and the others also described what happened earlier. Song Qingshu said, "But if it weren't for her sorrowful wind softening technique, would Wu-Tang have suffered such a disaster?" Zhang Sanfeng shook his head. "That's not the case. Before the sorrowful wind softening technique took effect, Yuan Xiao, Lin Zhou, and the others had already been restrained. The main reason was because the enemy's schemes were all interconnected. It was impossible to guard against them." Zhang Sanfeng took a deep breath and continued, "You saw it just now. The enemy was willing to go to any lengths. First, they calculated the lamp oil, then they set up the doors and windows, and they even specially found a group of blind assassins skilled in assassination in the dark. For insurance, there was also the heavenly empty Taoist who faked his death cough cough." Song Qingshu hurriedly supported him. "Great Grandmaster, rest well. Don't talk anymore. Zhang Sanfeng still pointed at Li Qingluo. Go check on her later. Taoist Yellow Wood's spirit jade technique is extraordinary. She's very heavily injured, and she was injured because she saved me. If she dies and news of this spreads to the Jianghu, then our Wu-Tang sect will have let her down. Good, good, good. Quick, help the Grand Preceptor back to his room to rest. Song Qingshu beckoned to the disciple beside him. Zhang Songshi and Yin Lighting stepped forward and said, "Let's send Master back." After what had happened just now, they were worried that there were still people from the Mansion of Spirits in hiding. They didn't dare to let others take care of it, and it was better to take care of it themselves. As for Yu Lianzhou, Song Yuan Xiao, Yu Diyin, and the others, they still needed to stay here to clean up this mess. I don't know where these blind killers came from, but their martial arts aren't weak, and they're good at fighting in the dark. Could it be that someone trained them to be blind from a young age? This is too far-sighted. Taoist Master Chong Su couldn't help but sigh as he examined the corpses of the blind assassins. Song Qingshu answered, "I might know where they came from. They should be evil masters who were invited by Zhuo Linchan to attack Mount Hua at the Temple of the King of Medicine, which almost led to the annihilation of Mount Hua. In the end, it was Ling Hu Chong who blinded them with a broken arrow style. After they escaped, they must have been trained by Zhuo Linchan. He thought of the end of the Smiling, the Proud Wanderer, where Yu Buchuan invited the people of the Five Mountain Sword sect to look at the lost Five Mountain sword techniques in the cave of the Repent Cliff. In the end, they were almost killed by Zhuo Linchan. Zhuo Linchan relied on this group of blind killers to slaughter all the masters of the Five Mountain Sword sect. Could it be that the mastermind behind this is Zhuo Linchan? Taoist Master Chong Su was shocked and angry. He always knew that Zhuo Linchan had great ambitions, but he didn't expect him to be so bold. Song Qingshu sneered. How could he have such a big hand? To be able to organize such a big conspiracy, there must be someone more powerful behind him. Song Yuan Xiao also said, I just heard Taoist Master Huang Mu mention old Saber Hancho. He must be the master behind the Mansion of Spirits, but I don't know who he is. Song Qingshu's eyes moved to Xiao Long Nu, only to see Xiao Long Nu shake her head and say, I just came here with my cousin. It's the first time I've even heard of the name Old Saber Hancho. Looks like we can only wait until she wakes up. Looking at Li Qingluo, Song Qingshu was deep in thought. Xiao Long Nu was a little anxious. Cousin's breath is getting weaker and weaker. Hurry up and save her. Yu Lianzhou also said, Qingshu, hurry up and save her. Master also just said that we're busy dealing with things here. We can't split up. Only then did Song Qingshu walk over and check Li Qingluo's pulse. He couldn't help but be startled. That shouldn't be. She has the Dark North Divine technique to protect her. Even if she's injured, it shouldn't be this serious. Xiao Long Nu answered. She was already seriously injured, plus she was agitated by Taoist Master Tian Su's words. Plus she was worried about you. All these factors added together caused her injuries to worsen. Song Qingshu looked at her in surprise. Long time no see. I didn't expect you to be so understanding. Xiao Long Nu answered. I just didn't know much about worldly things before. It's not like I'm really stupid. Hearing her describe herself in such a serious manner, Song Qingshu didn't know what to say for a moment. Feeling that Li Qingluo's pulse was indeed getting weaker, Song Qingshu didn't waste any more time. He helped her up and sat behind her to help her heal. Protect me. Now that he wasn't sure if there were still people from the Mansion of Spirits on the mountain, Song Qingshu didn't dare to be careless. Okay. Xiao Long Nu unsheathed her sword and stood to the side. She had always been cold and elegant, and now, with the cold, gleaming sword in her hand, she stood there with an even more unapproachable aura. Because he was often injured, he also often healed others. Song Qingshu was now very familiar with using his inner force to heal others. With the addition of the solitary sun finger, which was a divine tool for healing internal injuries, Li Qingluo's injuries stabilized after about an hour. Help her back to the house to rest. After a period of rest, her injuries will slowly heal, Song Qingshu said as he stood up. Xiao Longnu nodded and wanted to help her cousin up, but it was very inconvenient to hold a sword with both hands. Song Qingshu saw her troubled expression and said, "Let me do it." As he spoke, he carried Li Qingluo and walked toward their house. Perhaps because she was being carried, Li Qingluo groaned and slowly woke up. Seeing Song Qingshu holding her, she asked weakly, "You saved me?" Song Qingshu replied indifferently, "Yellowwood Taoist, Heavenly Oasis Taoist, and Stupid Tea are all dead. Now, I can only find out about the Mansion of Spirits from you. Of course, I can't let you die. You don't mean what you say." Li Qingluo pursed her lips and smiled. Suddenly, she noticed Xiao Longnu and Shun Bijuan at the side, and hurriedly returned to her usual cold and ruthless expression. Xiao Longnu looked at her in surprise. She thought to herself, "My cousin is usually serious in speech and manner. Why is she suddenly showing such a girlish attitude today? Was it because she was injured and weak?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.